Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's ranking all episodes of The Expanse. In this video, I will rank every episode of The Expanse, all 62 episodes of the 6 seasons of The Expanse, from my least favorite to my favorite. So, first of all, I thought this would be a good time to do a ranking of The Expanse, since the show is technically finished. Now, we never know if we will get more seasons, but at least for now, this is it. This is all of the episodes of The Expanse that we know will be released. So I decided, hey, why not rank the whole thing? At first I was going to do like a top 10 or top 20, and I'm like, hey, why not just do all of them? So, needless to say, this video is going to be quite long, but that's okay. So, next thing I want to say is that this, of course, is just my opinion, and not going by what episodes are most popular or whatnot. For that, you can check other websites like IMDb, whatever. This is just my subjective opinion, so many may disagree with it, and that's fine. That's okie dokie, okay. But I'm here to give my ranking of the 62 episodes of The Expanse would be. Now, next thing I want to say is that there is no bad episode of The Expanse. As you will see, I give every episode a rating between 1 and 10. 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, and there is no single episode of The Expanse that received a rating lower than a 6. So I literally think there's no bad episodes of The Expanse. Which of course made it a bit harder to rank them, but I don't think there's ever been a show like that. Even some of my favorite shows like Breaking Bad or BoJack Horseman, like the vast majority of the episodes are a 6 or higher, but there's a few. Like, you get into my bottom 5, there's a couple of 4s and a couple of 1s, and like stuff like Next Generation and Deep Space Nine that had more episodes. There's like a lot of episodes that get a rating lower than a 5. And X-Files, for example, like half the episodes of that show get a rating lower than a 5. So, but there were really great episodes too. So it was mixed. So this it really signifies this the show as a really great one. In my opinion, I do think this is one of the best shows of all time. That is something to bear in mind as you disagree with some of my ratings. How dare you? I think this is the best show of all time. Or one of the best. I'm not really willing to say the best, because that's too definitive of a statement that I'm ready to make at this point in time. But definitely one of the best, for sure. The only other show that would come close to this word, that is wherever no episode get a rating lower than a 6, was Game of Thrones, but that was until the final 2 seasons, because most of these episodes from the final 2 seasons of Game of Thrones get a rating lower than a 3, so so that excludes that. So I do think this is it's the only example of a show that is so highly rated. So because of that, I usually don't use decimal points in my rating system, but because I'm not really doing a range between 1 and 10, because the range is actually between 6 and 10. So I'm using decimal points, and because that's how I sort of sort through all these episodes, because there's a lot of episodes to sort through. How do I sort them out? Put them in groupings, and so I started using the decimal system in order to help sort of group them together. So I do 0.5. So I do 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 8, 8.5, 9, 9.5, 10. So as I usually do when I do these long countdowns, I will have a card that flashes up before an episode, group of episodes I'm about to list that are Alva ratings. So if I do I'll start with my 6 rated episodes. So 6 will flash up. Then when I get to the 6.5 episodes, and that will flash up, and so on and so forth. as we go through the countdowns to sort of help sort of group them together in various things. And that's the one thing. So after I did my ranked all the episodes, I compared it to IMDb because you can see a lot of the viewers or the users, IMDb users, ranked each episode, and they grouped the average score for each episode based off these ratings, and they put them in rankings of least popular to most popular. And so I compared my ranking to their rankings, and what I noticed is I like season 6 better than the masses do, and or at least IMDb users. And I like season 3 less than the masses do, which, talking to people, I'm not surprised. I kind of got that idea already. But for the most part, a lot of episodes actually ended up being around the same spot. I was actually surprised how many. I was like, hey, that's where I have it. But there's a few that are a bit off, like some that are a bit higher on them than I have, and some I have a bit higher. But there was one episode in particular that there was a huge disparity, which was in my top 5 best episodes, and IMDb had it ranked 7th to the bottom. And I was like, what? And I'll get to that episode. And reading the reviews for that episode, I could see the user base was very split on that episode as well. So that's why the rating wasn't very high, because there was a lot of people who hated it, but there was also a lot of people who loved it, where I fit into that latter of people who loved it. Anyway, I'll talk about that episode when I get there. So enough of the goddamn preamble. Let's go ahead, jump right into it, and get into my ranking of all 62 episodes of The Expanse. Alright, so let's start at the bottom of my list. Number 62, Season 1, Episode 6, an episode very aptly named Rock Bottom, because it's at the bottom of my list, get it? Anyway, as I said, there's no such thing as a bad episode of The Expanse. This is a good episode. But there's such a thing as a bad storyline of The Expanse, and this one has the worst in my opinion, and that is the one with Diego as a rock hopper going off with his uncle, and his uncle getting harassed by the Martians, and he goes off like crazy and gets himself killed while Diego gets stranded in space. This, to me, was the dictionary definition of filler. It was totally unnecessary. I've heard people make the argument that it was necessary to describe how the Belters are being discriminated against by the Martians, but I disagree, because they already made that very clear. Like, the first couple episodes did a really good job of showing that and making that very clear. We got the Belter yelling on series about how Belters are oppressed. We've seen other specific examples of the Inners be treating the Belters poorly. So this was totally unnecessary. This was basically it was there to tell us something that we already knew, and it didn't give us any more information than we already had. It did nothing to increase the storylines of any of the other stories. It introduced a character that we don't really care about, and never really did, and we didn't really need this backstory for him at all. So it was a total waste of time, and so that's the main reason why this is at the bottom of my list. But as I said, there's no bad episodes, because there are other good things in this episode, such as this is when the Rocinante first arrives at Tycho Station. They had that showdown with Fred Johnson where he tries to board the ship, but Naomi and Holden outsmart him, which was really cool to see. And we get some good character interactions with Holden and Naomi. This is when the crew are first starting to bond, because they have a chance to just leave and stay at Tycho while Holden goes off with some other OPA people off on this adventure. But then they decide to band together, and they decide that they're still crew, and we get some good scenes with them hanging out at the bar or whatever that were cool. And we also get in this episode the scenes with Dolls talking to Miller. Now, I thought this storyline of Miller, Dolls' goons almost killing Miller, was a bit dumb, and the whole Miller investigation was stretched off of too much. But Jared Harris is an amazing actor, and he showcased that in this episode with some of his like speeches about how his sister died, and Miller's trying to paint him as this egotistical asshole. And, when I first watched the show, I really bought into it, but now I'm starting to see that he actually has Dolls pegged wrong. So those scenes were really interesting. But overall, as I said, that Rock Hawker stuff was a complete waste of time. So that's why Rock Bottom is at the rock bottom of my list. And so next, we get into number 61 on my list, which is season 2, episode 6, Paradigm Shift. Now again, there are no bad episodes of Expanse, but this episode has the second worst storyline in the entire show, and that is this storyline of the guy who invented the Epstein drive and how he was flying it out and accidentally discovered it, and he was like stuck to the back of the thing and ended up dying. That should have been like a webisode, like a featurette. That should have been like this bonus feature that you go search out that's on like a DVD or on the website or something, because it had no place in the episode itself. It was a complete another waste of time. Had nothing to do with anything. They very tenuously tried to connect it to the theme of the episode. Oh, the protomolecule's a paradigm shift, and just like the creation of the Epstein drive. But that's a very, very thin connection, and it's really not necessary. And I thought it was the most boring waste of time thing to see this guy. And the way like it's narrated, I described it sounding like a TED talk. It's like a bit ridiculous. And I think it's one of the worst things the show has ever done. But other stuff in this episode are really great. This is the episode where we get Officer Rala come out to Aaron Wright, and basically, even though he pretty much confirmed that she knew Aaron Wright was working with Jules Pierre Mal, where she gives the awesome speech about how she's gonna rain holy hellfire down on and Jules Pierre Mal's family, and it was so amazing the way she put it. There will be pariahs, outlaws. It was absolutely one of the best Sorella moments of the show. And this is, of course, we see the Rosinante crew return to Tycho Station as champions after they saved Earth from Eros. Which was cool too, and also at the end we get Bobby Draper being attacked by the protomolecule hybrid, which was also cool. But see, as I said, there are no bad episodes of The Expanse, but that Epstein drive stuff really ruined the episode. So next we'll get into my number 60, which is season 1, episode 2, The Big Empty. So yes, the second episode of the entire show, and this episode was okay. In retrospect, I didn't like how all the crew were bickering and fighting amongst, like Amos threatening to kill Holden, and they're bickering and fighting amongst each other. This is a change from the book, which I don't know why they did, and eventually in season 2 they corrected this and stopped doing this. And I don't, you could just say, oh, they started out very snippy and learned to like each other, but I don't know. I don't think this was necessary. And as for the episode itself, it's okay. Like, it was basically the Apollo 13 episode where they were trapped in the shuttle pod night after the Canterbury was exploded, and then the shuttle was falling apart, and they had to do all these improvising to try to save it, which was okay. Like, it was pretty cool seeing Shed save Alex's life and stuff like that. The Miller storyline was really boring. This is when he does like other stuff with this gangster that would have nothing to do with anything. And he, I think this is the one he comes over with Diago and stay away from the Aqua or whatever. And the Alvis Morales storyline was okay. I guess this is when they introduce Aaron Wright into the show, and he like berates her for torturing the Belters. So a very sort of average episode. Next we'll get onto my number 59, which is season 2, episode 10, Cascade. So this is the episode where the Rosnate crew with Prax arrive on Ganymede and search for Strickland. This drags on a little bit in my opinion, particularly the scene where Prax talks to Amos about the Cascade and how it all plant life is falling apart on Ganymede. That was kind of boring. I don't really see what it has to do with anything. I mean, I suppose it's a metaphor, but I don't know. Wasn't entirely that interesting to me. Also, this is when Bobby Draper breaks out of the compound on Earth and goes and talks to the, to the poor people in Basic, which again, these scenes were okay. Again, it kind of dragged a bit for me, but it was cool. We got that cool shot of Draper looking at the ocean where Cotillard and Avasarala like talk to her and try to convince her the Martians killed her team, and she doesn't really want to hear it. So that stuff was pretty cool. And also, on Ganymede, this is when they were looking for, Praxis' daughter, and they come across that guy who sells information for chicken. It's like, no chicken, bucket the lion. And Amos beats the fuck out of him with a can of chicken. That was cool. So yeah, I mean, this episode was okay. Alright, so next we'll move over to the next episode, number 58 on my list, Delta V. Now, parts of this episode I really like. Other parts, not so much. So, Delta V is Season 3, Episode 7. This is the first episode that covers the Book 3 material. And the reason why it's so low on my list is because it is incredibly rushed. Otherwise, I would like this episode, but it's very misplaced in the middle of season 3. This should have been the start of its own season. At the very least, they could have made season 3. They could have split it and had a mid-season break of like 6 months apart, and then had this be like the mid-season premiere. It still would have worked better than just having in the middle of season 3 and trying to pretend like it's not the start of a new story, which it clearly is. And they rush through the start way too fast. Monica and her team are just there, and they just quickly rush through exposition of the Martians trying to take the Rosnate back, and so they're there to pay their fees. They quickly rush through explanation of the ring and how everyone's out there. They quickly rush through the fact that Naomi is on the Behemoth now, and they introduce those characters, but otherwise, and they quickly rush through the introduction of Clarissa Mal as well, which I feel like a lot of people who hadn't read the books weren't attached to this character at all, because they just sped through it. Her introduction. But it's a decent episode. I do like some of the stuff with the on the Behemoth with Ashford. The introduction of Ashford was cool, and seeing the interactions with Drummer and Naomi, and then of course the Belter slingshotter was pretty awesome. I was like, yeah! And the part where he's like his girlfriend sent him a message. It's like, oh, your Baratna is keeping me busy. And this guy walks by. All you see is this giant Speedo, and he's like, hey, be safe out there, superstar. That was awesome. So don't get me wrong, it's a decent episode, but it was incredibly rushed. They could have done a better job with this. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into number 57 on my list, season 5, episode 9, Winnipesaukee. Now, yeah, so this episode is decent. It's got some great action choreography. It's good setting up for the finale of season 5, but I have some issues. First of all, we get scenes of Naomi on her ship, on the ship with no oxygen, and she's trapped and she's trying to get help. Now, a lot of people, I complain about this whole storyline and say that it lasted way too long. They exaggerated it, saying that we had to spend 5 episodes with Naomi trapped on the ship alone. In actuality, we only spent 2 episodes. I guess 3 if you count the finale, but that's when she actually got rescued, so I wouldn't count that. But at the very least, you could stretch it to 3. And the thing is, I think it should have just been 2. I think it should have just been the previous episode to this, because that's the main episode of her being trapped there, and it showed her ingenuity in trying to find rescue. And then in the finale, when she actually did get rescued, you need those. You don't need this one. So I think even though this episode didn't show her very much, I think it's the main reason why people feel like it dragged too long, and without this episode, it wouldn't have dragged as much. Now, as far as the main storyline of Amos on Earth trying to get into the ships on the Lake Winnipesaukee, and then encountering with his thug friends, and then encounter these security guards. My main issue is the fight with the security guards. Now, a lot of people who know much about action scenes and stunt choreography said this was amazing. It was amazingly shot, great cinematography, which I agree with. But story-wise, I didn't make any sense, because it presented these security guards as like rent-a-cops, and Eric and everyone wasn't worried about them. Oh, you stupid rent-a-cops, go away. And then when they actually come to attack, which of course they would right before they're ready to lift off, they seem to have unlimited numbers. Like, they just grow men out of nowhere, and they just come up and they like do this huge ass like fight that almost kills all of them. And that's not at all the impression they gave of these characters, and none of the other people were taking them seriously. And also, it really bothers the hell out of me that Clarissa, told they were going to shoot those rent-a-cops right there, but Clarissa was like, no, don't do it, no more killing. And because she did that, almost all of Eric's men got killed, and it's her fault. That really doesn't sit right with me. Now, of course, there were some cool moments, such as Clarissa doing her thing with the mods and killing those people, and he got some quippy lines or whatever, and it was great seeing Amos and the look on his face when he's out into space again. But there's too many things about this episode that irked me. Alright, so next we shall get into my number 56. Season 4, Episode 7, A Shot in the Dark. This episode comes when the colonists hide in the alien structure after the tsunami and disaster hits, and tensions starting to rise, where LV discovers that everyone has these parasites in their eyes that are making them go blind, which has this extra element of they're all screwed. And so Mercury decides to be nice to the Belters for once, because he realizes that they'll be at a disadvantage soon. And meanwhile, Avasarala apologizes to Arjun, which is played by that horrible actor that recast. So I didn't like any of the scenes with the fake Arjun. And also, I didn't know. I just didn't really like the storyline. But then it ends with Avasarala having to trying to find and kill Marco, but the mission going totally wrong. And a lot of civilians getting killed, which was pretty intense. And of course, it also ends with the discovery of the death slugs. Boy, I love the death slugs. But overall, this is, just a pretty good episode. So, next we'll get into my number 55, Season 3, Episode 1, Flight or Fight. So this episode was decent. This is the start of Season 3, where the crew was being really pissy with Naomi because they discovered she gave the proton molecule to Fred Johnson, and this bickering I got a bit old and annoying. And then how the Bobby Draper and Alvis Varela storyline, they were still trapped on Jules Paramal's yacht, where I thought they pretty much solved that storyline at the end of season 2, but they got more of it, which I kind of felt was unnecessary, particularly the part where Bobby Draper had to go outside the ship to open the bay for the Razorback, and she almost fell off the ship. Like, all of that seemed so unnecessary. But it was still exciting, especially Alvis Varela having to give the tech Theo a speech about how he needed to get the recording of Aaron right so that she had hard evidence against him. That was cool. And of course, we see Alvis Varela and Bobby Draper speed away on the Razorback. And at the end of the episode, we see Holden come clean and realize that Prax's daughter is probably on Io, and he makes that really cool speech where he tells Prax, I never gave a shit about your daughter, but I do now, and we should drop whatever we're doing. And this is like a character growth for Holden, where he realizes to let the proton molecule go and do right by Prax. And Naomi is going, oh, we're going to Tycho, but everyone just ignores her. It's like, Io, yeah, cool, let's go. So that was cool. So yeah, so it was a decent episode. So next we'll get into my number 54, which is The Seventh Man, Season 2, Episode 7. So this is, again, the episode where Bobby Draper gets interrogated by this Martian asshole who tries to, and when she realizes that there was a seventh man from the other than the 6 UN's soldiers or UN Marines that attacked them, that really it was a 7th man without a vac suit who the UN soldiers were running from. And of course, the asshole interrogators try to convince her this totally wasn't the case, and she's lying, and they don't want to hear any more about a thing, which was okay. This is also where you got the interactions between Dawes and Fred Johnson, which I thought it was passable. It was okay the way the political posturing that Fred Johnson, Anderson Dawes, and again, like, yeah, that guy's a really good actor. But where he was like, oh, Baratna, Fred Johnson, but he's just an Erta. Like the way he very expertly tried to sway opinions, where Holden was just had none of that, didn't want to do anything to do with any of this bullshit and just wanted them to all work together. But then, of course, Dawes ends up stealing Cote d'Azur right out of Fred Johnson's nose, which was kind of intense. So, a decent episode. So next, we will get into my number 53, Season 5, Episode 2, Churn. So this is when Amos goes back to Earth, and he tries to get the house in order of Lydia, the woman who raised him, and we get a bit more backstory on how that relationship was kind of fucked up. But he does he finds that she passed away, but she has a husband, leaves behind a husband who's going to get everything taken away from him because the gangsters were only taking care of him because he lived with Lydia, and without her they don't give a shit about him. So Amos goes to his old gangster friends and sort of convinces them to keep paying for the old guy's house. And at first, the gangster Eric was just freaked out that Amos was trying to come back to the life. But of course, Amos has no intention of doing so. And that whole storyline, honestly, it was okay. It dragged a little bit for me. But then we get other storylines in here, such as Monica Stewart getting kidnapped and Holden trying to find her, and going with Bull and just in the nick of the time getting her from a container right before she suffocates. That was pretty intense. So, decent episode. So next we will get into my number 52, Season 4, Episode 2, Jetsam. Now, this is the second episode of season 4, where the Rocinante crew on Illis, and they're trying to get the lay of the land. Holden, Naomi, and Elvie go visit the weird structure, fly drones to it, and of course, Amos rides around with Mercury and realizes that the guy's an asshole, and he keeps calling him Marty, and he's like, "My name's Mercury," I like this episode mainly for the moment we get with Naomi and Holden on Illis, where they spend the night on Illis and look at the night sky, which was really a nice romantic scene between the two of them. A really key moment, especially for Naomi, who never really been to a planet before, and of course would not be able to stay there for very long. So that was a really nice moment. But then it ends, of course, with Miller returning and getting Holden to turn on all the weird alien shit, which does not go very well for them. So that was a decent episode too. So then we will get into my number 51, season 3, episode 4. Reload. I do think this episode was kind of unnecessary, but it's still not a bad episode. It's still a good episode. So this is when the Rocinante picking through the ruins, the wreckage of a Martian fleet that was attacked by the UN for supplies, and they happen to find 4 Martian Marines, which they help recover, but then they repay this kindness by trying to take over the Rocinante. And in some regard, those Martian Marines were annoying, but in another regard, you kind of understand where they're coming from. And it was a pretty cool scene at the end where they were holding Alex at gunpoint, and Holden was trying to talk them out of it, and they didn't seem interested in backing down until Bobby Draper came and related to them. And of course, there was this countdown because Amos was on his way, and once Amos was there, they were dead. And they didn't really understand that, but Holden did. And I love that Bobby Draper managed to talk him down right before Amos showed up, and Amos was like, "Damn, did I miss it?" That was cool. Anyway, we will now get into my number 50, season 1, episode 7, Windmills. So this has the storyline with Avasarala going to visit Holden's mother, which frankly I thought the storyline was dumb and a waste of time and kind of filler and unnecessary. And they just wanted a way to throw Holden's mother in and try to give backstory on how he has 8 parents or whatever. But I think it was kind of silly, like that the leader of the UN, like this second in command or third in command of the government of the entire planet of Earth, would waste time talking to Holden's mother because she wants to understand Holden better. That sounds dumb. But other good things in this episode, particularly donkey balls. This is the donkey balls episode. Absolutely love that whole sequence where the Rocinante were trying to get to Eros, or the asteroid near Eros, and they're being stopped by Martian patrols, and there's that spy on board that they discover, and Amos is being a dick to him and wanting to kill him, and Holden is warning him not to kill him, and then they are about to get boarded by a Martian patrol, and they come up with the idea, because Alex said that he wants to experience Martians using the phrase donkey balls to indicate they were a black ops team, and so the Martian ship immediately backed down. So they worked very hard to find the hidden code. It ended up being the word ubiquitous, which was also a code in the book, but for a different thing, and 2 other words like polygrobum or whatever. I can't remember what the other words were. But then Alex just said, "and a couple of donkey balls." He just threw it in just for the hell of it, and then the Martians backed down. So that was a really cool scene. And then you also had, of course, Amos was preparing to kill the Martians who were going aboard, and Holden was so against it he pulled a gun on Amos to try to get him to stop, which I thought was a bit silly. Like, I don't know, that conflict between Holden and Amos I didn't really get that much. But the whole donkey balls thing, it was cool. I will say that. And then, of course, it ends with Aaron Wright announcing that he's going to send the attack team to kill Holden anyway. So, yeah. Good and bad, but overall decent episode. So, next we will get into number 49 on my list is season 4, episode 6, displacement. So this episode begins with Holden announced after he had announced to both all the colonists on Illis that he was talking to Miller, and they didn't take very well to this, and they all refused to back down from their various positions until Holden reveals that there's a disaster coming for them that will wipe out the settlement, because they saw in orbit that there was an explosion, nuclear explosion on the other side of the planet. It's going to send a tsunami and shockwaves, and everyone in orbit confirms this to all the doubters, but the Belters still don't want to leave and have to get assurances from Holden that they'll be taken care of. So I thought the majority of this episode moved kind of slowly, and I wasn't really that interested in it. But I did like the ending with when the sound wave came and like destroyed the building that Holden and Elvie were in. That was pretty intense, and some Belters got killed. And then the huge tsunami hit, and they had to like hide in the alien structure and lower the thing at the last moment. That was all pretty intense stuff. So decent episode. So now I'll get to my number 48, which is season 4, episode 3, Subduction. So this episode's pretty good. So this is when, right after Mercury had just killed the Belter, right in the middle of the street, and then he starts to. This is the aftermath. Amos is realizing that there's a problem here, but Holden and Alex are too busy looking at the protomolecule structure bullshits that has been turned on. Meanwhile, Mercury starts running his investigation. He is bugs the Belters and spies on them and finds out which ones were responsible for destroying his ship, and plans to kill them all. And meanwhile, he realizes that Lucia was involved, but he doesn't know how, so we get a couple of tense scenes with him sort of interrogating her and questioning her in a very sort of slick way. But Naomi shows up and she's not having any of it and getting pissed off, but then she's starting to succumb to the gravity of the world, and Lucia tries to warn her that she needs to go back to the ship, otherwise that she is going to die, because they had seen the Belters do that before. And then it ends with a really tense fight scene where Mercury slaughters all the terrorists, and says, "I hope that answers your question," and shoots him in the face. And meanwhile, we also get another storyline, I believe, where Bobby, her nephew, gets abducted, and she meets the dude who doesn't, so she goes to report to police and find out that the dude who abducted her nephew is in fact the police. And it really shows how corrupt Mars is, and how much it's fallen, and how it's basically falling apart. So that was an interesting episode. Next, we will get into number 47 on my list, which is season 5, episode 6, Tribes. So this episode mainly follows Amos and Clarissa as they wander through the woods, because they could simply go to the UN to get rescued, but that would result in Clarissa being arrested and put back in prison, or just shot in the face, as Amos explains. And she's like, well, I don't really want that. So Amos could simply go back, but he decides to stick with Clarissa, and he has a plan to go to Baltimore, but they have to get there first, and they meet people on the way, and then they come across this asshole end of the world type who's just loving the apocalypse and who is eager to shoot Amos, but Clarissa uses her mods to save him, and they just kill him, and then they ponder over whether or not that was the right thing to do, just kill someone and steal their stuff, which is an interesting pondering, although that storyline did drag a little bit for my tastes. We meet David Pastor in this episode, who becomes the Secretary General, which this whole storyline I think is a little bit of a waste of time, but that's okay. And this is also when Marco Inaros entices or sort of blackmails or intimidates Drummer into joining his Free Navy, and we get those intense scenes with the negotiations between Marco and Drummer, which are also pretty good. So now I'll move over to my number 46, Season 5, Episode 8, Hard Vacuum, sticking with Season 5. Now, a lot of people really didn't like this episode and thought it was really boring because this is the episode where it's mostly dealing with Naomi being trapped alone on the Czechoslovakia without any sort of equipment or oxygen or anything. And I think there's a lot of sort of, I want to say subterfuge, but that's not really the right word, but a lot of subtle sort of explanations going on. Like, this episode is really counting on the audience to pick up on a lot of visual clues rather than force feeding them what's going on. And I think for a lot of people, they don't really like that, because a lesser episode would have voiceover or something from Naomi that explains exactly what she's doing, like why is she putting this and what's happening when she puts the mark on the wall and puts her helmet on. But the clues are all there to pick up if you know. And I actually kind of like that subtle style of storytelling. I like that they didn't resort to voiceover or something that just handheld the audience and walked them through exactly what was going on, because it was actually really intense, the situation Naomi was in, that she's in a hopeless situation, and they do maybe hammer this a little too hard, which is why it's not that high on my list, but I still really liked it. I still really got that, and towards the end where she was like running out of breath and changing the message, the distress signal that was the trap to lure the Rosnate in, and she was changing it to, instead of saying I've lost control, to saying I'm in control. I thought that was amazing, intense. Like, the music they were playing in the background was like really emotional. It was a good moment, but as I said, this episode did drag a bit, and it also dealt with the David Pastor storyline with him like destroying Palace, and I think that they like, this didn't really have the repercussions for the rest of the show, so I don't think this storyline was particularly necessary to do again. So yeah, it wasn't the greatest episode, but I did enjoy it. So next we will move over to number 45 on my list, which is Season 3, Episode 9, Intransigence. Sorry. So this is the episode that shortly follows after the Rosnate hid in the ring to hide from the ships trying to destroy them, and so they're sort of figuring out what the ring is. And the Martians are sending the probe in, and we see that anything that goes over a certain speed limit gets grabbed and stopped and slowly floats towards the middle, and there's a station in the middle, and the Rosnate tried to stay ahead of it, and this is of course when Amos figures out that the documentary team were the ones who, or at least the cameraman was the one who sabotaged Rosnate in the first place. He didn't realize what he was doing at the time, and that it would mean his own death, but Amos is still not happy about it, and Holden is preoccupied trying to talk to Miller, who isn't showing up, and so Amos kind of goes a bit crazy with terrorizing the documentarians, and Alex tries to stop him, but it was too late, and he basically just gives them spacesuits and tosses them out the airlock so that they can get picked up by the Martians. And the idea is for them to put in a good word with the Martians, but it doesn't seem like that's likely, seeing how Amos mistreated them, which is pretty interesting. But we basically get the situation where there's a speed limit, and they're both going to the maximum speed that they can. So either the Martians are going to catch the Rosnate if they slow down, but if they don't slow down, then the Rosnate eventually is going to hit the other side of the ring, which is going to kill them. So they're kind of in a hopeless situation, and Holden decides that the only way out of it is to slow down and let the Martians catch them, because the Martians, when they board the Rosnate, they'll clearly see that he isn't a terrorist and not responsible for destroying the ship. But the Martians want to take the Rosnate away from him, which they will do, and so that's not really desired outcome. But as soon as Holden tries to slow down, Miller decides to show up and saying, "Hey, you can't slow down. We gotta get to investigate the crime scene." And so it ends with Holden leaving with Miller in a spacesuit to go to the station in the middle. So pretty intense, pretty good stuff. So next, we'll move over to my number 44, Season 2, Episode 3, Static. So this episode takes place directly after the attack on Thross Station, where Miller just shot Dresden in the face, and so Holden's not very pleased with Miller, and he yells at him and wants him arrested, and it's like, "Get the hell off the station!" He kicks him off the Rocinante, and Miller had this nice scene with Miller in the bar, and Amos is like drinking all the shots, and then he's trying, because Miller's like, "Look, Amos, you're just as much of a killer as I am," and he's like, "Yeah, but you kind of pissed the captain off, and he wants you off the ship, and there's nothing you can do about it." And then, of course, Diago and Stats, two not so good belters, take a liking to Miller and ask him to come stay with them. And this is the episode that has this really cool montage where, because this is the first time we see Drummer and Naomi's friendship, and they play handball together and they go out to clubs. We get this cool montage that has like Naomi and Drummer dancing at the club with the dance club music, while Alex obsesses over having lost people in the battle and runs all these battle situations. Holden is obsessing over Kotazar, the psychopath scientist. And so that was a cool montage. I remember thinking about that. And then, of course, the episode ends with Miller getting the bright idea to use the Nauvoo to smash it into errors to destroy it. So, decent episode, too. So let's go ahead and move over to number 43 on my list, Season 3, Episode 2, IFF. I think on IMDb this was much, much higher. I think this was top 20 for IMDb, so some people might think I had this a bit too low. It was an intense episode, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I like all these episodes, because this is the one where Bobby Draper and Avasarala are on the Razorback, running away from the UN destroyer that's trying to kill them, and the Rosnate answered the distress call. And so Holden and Amos don't want to answer the distress call. They want to just go to Io to get Prax's daughter. And Naomi and Alex do, because Alex wants to help a Martian in trouble, and Naomi realizes it's a Razorback. There's some connection to the greater mystery of the protomolecule involved in this situation. I actually side with Alex and Naomi on this. I've heard the other opinion where they thought it was a waste of time, but my reasoning is the same for Naomi's, that this clearly has something to do with the bigger issues involved, and there's more to this than the simply Martians crying for help. So I think Holden is being a bit of a dick here, but Prax is the tiebreaker. He decides to do the deciding vote that lets him go after Bobby and Avasarala and save them. However, Prax, he says he does it because he wants to help someone in need, but really he's just trying to postpone finding out that his daughter is dead, which he's afraid is going to be the case. So that was pretty cool, and we got the cool fight scene Prax didn't secure the equipment properly, and so Amos has to run around with the G forces like pushing him around every which way, which was pretty intense. But so it's not like that I have anything against this episode. I just don't think it's particularly great. Like it's good. It's good fight scenes, good intense stuff, but there's nothing that's really pushes it forward to like the outstanding sort of thing. So this is where it lands to me. Anyway, let me go ahead and move over to the next episode on my list, which is number 42, season 3, episode 11, Fallen World. Now, this is the episode that takes place immediately after the slow zone speed limit slowed even further, and which stopped a lot of ships dead in their tracks to the point where a lot of people ended up being spots on the wall or just being killed. And so it was pretty intense seeing the carnage, the aftermath, particularly Pastor Anna going around the Thomas Prince, seeing everyone who's died, and of course finding out that Clarissa killed her best friend Tilly, and Pastor Anna realizing that that's who Clarissa is, and getting and running after her and trying to chase her, and Clarissa goes over to the Rocinante and has that huge fight with Naomi, and then Anna shows up at the last minute to save Naomi's life, which is all pretty intense stuff. And meanwhile, the Martians take Holden back, try to take him back to the ship, and they're sort of the other Martian Marines with Draper sort of want to kill Holden, but Draper sort of sticks up for him, and they kind of get pissed with her whenever she does. So this is a really intense episode. It would be higher on my list if not for the storyline with Ashford and Drummer being stuck on some farming equipment on the Behemoth, and they're singing songs and talking about the ship, and I don't know. That stuff really dragged for me. I feel like that time could have been better spent in the finale, because the finale was incredibly rushed. But so it kind of irritates me that they wasted the time on that storyline that dragged way too long, in my opinion. So that's why this episode isn't higher, but it's still this high because it is still intense. It is still a really good episode, and of course it ends with Ashford spinning the drum and being sort of my ship because he's in command, but he has the right idea of getting all of the UN and Martian folks aboard his ship so they can heal. Like that was a good moment too. So yeah, like this episode a lot. It just had that one storyline that bothered me. Anyway, we will get into my number 41 next, which is season 3, episode 3, Assured Destruction. So this is when follows immediately IFF when Bobby Draper and Avasarala come on board the Rocinante, which I love seeing them on board. We also get some more like back on Earth. We get this battle of wits between Aaron Wright and Anna as they fight over the Secretary General, who's a bobblehead, and that was pretty interesting too. But yeah, so I loved seeing Avasarala and Holden, and I love how Holden's kind of like apathetic, and he just wants to help Prax, where Avasarala is trying to bring him back to the bigger picture, and Holden's just sick of being a hero. But Avasarala sees that that's who he really is and tries to talk him into it, and eventually, like at the end, they cut through the bullshit, as Avasarala says, and they share information, which I love. So it was a really good episode, but I didn't like the fact that Bobby Draper was such an asshole to the Rosnate. It's like, oh, this is Itachi, I'm going to take it over. Like, that's stupid. That was out of character for me. And as soon as Holden shows up, she just automatically stops doing that. Like, I don't know. So I could have done without that personally, which is why this episode isn't higher, but it was still good. It's still great to finally get to see Avasarala and Holden meet in person. Like, and the chemistry between them was great. So, now let me move over to my number 40, which is Season 1, Episode 3, Remember the Cant. So this, of course, is when Holden's message about the Martians destroying the Canterbury gets out and it causes riots on series. You have all these people spray painting stuff like "Remember the Cant." Miller and his partner Havelock are sort of bumping heads because Havelock is sort of he made friends with the prostitute who was in danger, and Miller doesn't like that and doesn't really like what Havelock is doing. But then of course Havelock gets like a pipe stuck in him at the end of the episode, which was pretty intense. And also for the Rosnate crew, of course they're not the Rosnate yet, but the Canterbury survivors, I should say, get picked up by the Martians on the Dullinger, and they're interrogated. And these interrogation scenes were really tense, and I did like them. I liked the way the interrogator was like, had those focus drugs, and he was acting all weird. He was like, back to Ceres, back to Saturn, back to Ceres, back to Saturn, stop it, Phoebe. That was a bit weird, but I do like the mind games that he was playing with them and trying to convince them that Naomi was OPA, which actually fits in with what we learned about her much later seasons, because we find out that she grew up with Marco Anaris, who was a radical OPA, but of course left them after because he was too radical for her. But the Martians don't know that. They just have this intel that she was once OPA, so they think that she still is, and they try to blame her for the destruction of the Canterbury and sow seeds of doubt throughout the survivors. And I love the difference between Shed and Amos, where Shed is like the willing collaborator. It's like, I'll tell you whatever you want to know. I'll help you out here. You want me to do this and sit on your back? Like, he'll do anything. Whereas Amos is like just trying to pick a fight, and like, hey, you dickless fucker, and trying to and just trying to resist every way possible. And so that was really intense. Where in the meanwhile, Holden is trying to, just protect his crew and trying to get them out of this situation with the Martian Marines. So yeah, it was an intense episode. I did really like that. So now let us move over to my number 39, season 2, episode 9, The Weeping Somnambulist. So this is when Holden and Amos take over this relief vessel in order to get to Ganymede, because Ganymede's so patrolled it was impossible to take the Rosnate there. But the relief vessel that they go on has a married couple as the pilots, and the woman in this situation does not like Holden at all and doesn't like them being on their ship, but they need to get the Ganymede, so they use the ship anyway. And eventually the blackmailers, who usually take a percentage of the relief supplies, decide to take all the supplies and are basically going to take the ship and probably kill the pilots. So Holden shows up and Amos show up to stop them, but in the process the husband ends up getting shot and killed, and so the wife is very pissed off at them and tells them to leave, or she'll call the police or anyone, whoever it takes to get off my ship. Which I understand her grief, but I think So it does make sense, but of course Holden is actually right, because they would both be dead and all their supplies would be gone had Holden not interceded. So they are correct to intercede, even though it ended up in the death of the guy, because had they not, it would have been way worse. They both would have died and their supplies would have been taken. But yeah, so that was still really intense. But I like this episode more for the storyline we have on Earth, where we have the peace summit between Earth and Mars, and this is when Bobby Draper testifies, and of course she lies just like the Martians want her to. But they kind of blindside her by blaming it all on the member of her team, Travis, which she knows is incorrect, and so it pisses her off. But what's great about this is the subtleties of the scene, because you can tell, I love the sort of face acting, like non-dialogue acting we get from Avasarala, because we can tell that she's reading this and she's picking up everything. She's picking up that Bobby's lying, that the Martians are forcing her to lie, and especially she reads her when Bobby's reaction, and this is where the Martians fucked up by not warning Bobby that they were going to blame Travis for everything, because it was all written all over her face that she was pissed off about this and blindsided. And so Alva Sarala, being the genius that she was, immediately picked up on this, and so she interrogated Bobby and had the whole she knew how to sort of slowly get into Bobby and doing small talk, but the other Martians were being impatient. They were like, "Where are you going with this?" And it's like, "Wherever I goddamn like," which is one of the best Avasarala moments. And then when the Captain Martins tries to stop in, because when Bobby Draper does mention the seventh man without a vac suit, Martins tries to step in, and she's like, "Oh, she's very fatigued," and Avasarala was like, "Whoever the fuck you are, sit down and shut up. I'm talking." Like, amazing moment. Absolutely loved that. It just shows how I love the subtleties of these scenes, and I love the way Avasarala sort of navigates that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of slow-paced scenes that are just set up in this episode, which is why it's not higher on my list, but I still do really love that scene a lot. Anyway, let me go ahead and move over to the next episode on my list, which is episode number 38, Season 1, Episode 5, Back to the Butcher. Now, I gotta be honest, this episode is this high mainly for the storyline with where we get the backstory of Fred Johnson and Anderson Station. I think this is a huge improvement on the books, and it was so intense, so emotional, so just really gets under your skin, because they show like a father and a daughter and these groups of just workers, regular people who are being mistreated and having their oxygen taken away from them, and so they form a protest, but the UN is being completely non-moving, and they don't care, and they're just treating them like terrorists. And even after the Belters surrender, they don't want to surrender. They want to make an example out of them and kill them anyway. And so they manage to get this message of plea, of hope, and so the people start to find out exactly what happened, which is why there was a lot of controversy involved in this. But of course, we find out the person who was in charge of this mission, who destroyed and killed all these innocent Belters, was Fred Johnson. And this is when we're first meeting Fred Johnson. So that was an intense blow. But of course, Fred Johnson, and they'll explain this in dialogue later on, but Fred Johnson wasn't aware that the Belters were surrendering, and when he found out, that's when he quit the UNN and became a drunk, and then Anderson Dawes picked him up and they ended up turning him to the OPA. But it all started because Fred Johnson was lied to by his superiors who wanted to kill a bunch of innocent civilians and used him to do so. So that was very, very, very intense. But most of this episode, actually, the rest of it kind of focuses on Miller's investigation of Julie Mount, which was okay. Like, it shows him getting more, that he's becoming more in love with her, and he learns more about her, and learns more about what might have happened to her, and that she was a really good person, and all that sort of stuff. Well, meanwhile, Dawes is trying to talk him out of the investigation, which kind of just makes him want to do it even more. And we also get scenes. This is where the Rocinante crew named the ship the Rocinante, and they come up with the name Rocinante for the ships. That was sort of, and they argued the debate over whether or not they should take Fred Johnson up on his offer for safe harbor, but then realized that really it's their only option. And Naomi doesn't want to because. Well, yeah, it's interesting. She's like, because she says, he has a cause, and I don't like being around people who are just all about the cause. And that, of course, has to do with her experience with Marco, which I love this forward thinking, because that hadn't been introduced yet, but there was like a subtle way of saying that. That's why she doesn't like people like that. And at the same time, we get the Butcher Anderson Station background, which further proves that Fred Johnson maybe is not the best guy. So it has this ominous feeling about going to visit him. So yeah, good episode that I really like. Alright, so next we'll move over to my number 37, which is season 6, episode 1, Strange Dogs. So this begins season 6, where the crew of the Rocinante is really in low spirits, because they've been out doing like odd jobs chasing Marco's men for months and not making any progress. So everyone's sort of on edge with each other's. Naomi is getting really depressed inside for having to kill people that she grew up with constantly, and it's sort of showing, and she takes it out on Clarissa, who she doesn't like being there, and Amos of course has an issue with this, so now he has an issue with him. And then Amos also has an issue with Holden, because Holden doesn't seem to be too focused on the task at hand. So tensions are really high and they're not in a very good place. Also, we follow Avasarala on Earth, where dealing with the devastation and how the disaster is getting even worse, and the death tolls in the millions, and how they're really demoralized because the UN and fleet is pinned down on Earth because Marco keeps throwing tons and tons of rocks at Earth. But of course later we have Drummer, who's also very demoralized because she's constantly on the run. They're constantly being attacked by people who are trying to get the bounty on her that Marco put out on her, and they decide to put Michio off the ship because she kind of fucked up in battle, and they consider her part of the family, so it's like a huge decision. It was pretty emotional. I really like that as well. And then with the Rocinante, however, later they had the moment where they find this asteroid that has an engine on it, and Holden almost dies, and Naomi's very pissed off at him about that because she was very traumatized by it, but Holden refused to leave, was just banging on it, which was a really intense scene. However, they do gain information that could help them make progress and do a huge strike against Marco. So pretty intense episode. So next on my list is number 36, Retrograde, which is season 4, episode 4. This episode this is after Mercury had his kill crazy rampage, but now he wants to kill Lucia, but Naomi does not want that to happen and tries to protect her. So Mercury goes off on a hunt, and Amos purposely gets himself beat up in order to buy time for Naomi and Lucia to escape. So he gets restrained while Mercury and his men go on a hunt for Lucia, and Holden of course is off looking at being preoccupied with all the alien artifacts until he gets a call for Naomi, and kind of fucks up here and gives away to Mercury that Lucia is with Naomi, so now Mercury knows exactly where Lucia is going. But Holden does get back in time to sort of help Naomi, and Lucia kind of wants to give herself up because she feels guilty about the role she did play in destroying the ship, and even though she knows it will mean her own death, she'd rather Mercury threatens her family, so that scares the hell out of her. But Naomi tries to convince her not to do it, but Lucia gets shot. Naomi is suffering from the gravity sickness of being on the planet, and so they're both not in good shape. But of course, Alex and Holden show up at the last minute and use the Rosinante's guns to scare Mercury away, and they're able to save Lucia and Naomi, get them on the ship and get the ship in orbit in order to protect Naomi's health. And Holden comes down to the planet and beats the shit out of Mercury, which was very satisfying. We also get a storyline with the belt, where Drummer and Ashford capture Marco, and they had convene this sort of trial of sorts with the other heads of the OPA to execute Marco, but too many factions don't want him executed, and so Drummer uses her deciding vote not to execute him because she realizes it will start. No question about it, definitely will start a civil war within the belt if she goes against her wishes and executes him. However, this is a decision she will later regret because she didn't realize how big of a threat Marco was, and all the stuff that Marco did later, where he basically took over the entire belt and killed millions and billions of people on Earth. And she could have stopped it by killing him here, but she didn't know that. So it's very, because I'd read the books, when I first saw this episode, I knew this was a huge mistake, and I think people who hadn't read the books didn't realize just how big of a mistake this was. But that makes her a fallible character. It makes her a more interesting character. So that was pretty interesting stuff too. So now we will move over to my number 35, season 3, episode 12. Congregation. This is the penultimate episode of season 3, where everyone congregates on the behemoth because the behemoth has the spin gravity that's allowing everyone to heal, and that's where Holden was taken. So the whole Rosinante crew decided to go back there with Clarissa as a prisoner in order to catch up with Holden. I do love the scene where Diago and the other Belters ask Amos to surrender his weapons, and he doesn't want to do it. Naomi talks him into it, but as soon as he does, Diago says to Naomi, "You're under arrest for desertion," and Amos just calmly is like, "I'm gonna need my gun back." That is a great Amos moment. However, Naomi talks him down because she realizes she's not in real trouble. She just talks with Ashford, and Ashford wants her to do repairs on the ship, and so she does the repairs so she can talk to Drummer and help her, who she's been paralyzed, so she wants to help her with her mech suit that lets her move around. And together they go visit Holden, who informs them that they're all about to die, that the entire human race is going to be wiped out unless they power down their ships, really setting the stakes for the finale. So I mean, it's mostly a build-up episode, and then the scenes do drag on a little bit for my taste, but it's still a really good episode. So next, we'll get into my number 34, Season 1, Episode 1, Dulcina, the first episode of the entire show. And I was actually surprised to see this is like the second lowest rated episode on IMDb, which I'm not sure why. I thought it was a great introduction to the show. It was a great setup. It's interesting in retrospect to go back and see the characters totally different. Babyface and just like carefree on the Canterbury, having been really apathetic. But I thought it was a great introduction. It was very intense that they introduced this romance between Holden and Ade, and at the end of the episode, Ade dies, and in a very sort of powerful way where she's like, "Holden, I have something very important to tell you," and gets blown up. Now, a lot of people speculate on what her important thing was, saying, "Oh, because the cliche is I'm pregnant," but the showrunner, or not the showrunner, but one of the producers who's also author of the books, Ty Frank, dispelled that and said, well, it's really up to the audience, but he doesn't really think that's the case. In his mind, it's more of we don't get to know. That's the really whole point of the scene, is that sometimes people have something really important to tell you that you never get to know, and you just can't know, which I think is pretty powerful, pretty intense. And of course, this episode also does a great job of, as a great first episode, because it does a great job of expelling the exposition of the whole situation in the belt, and Earth and Mars, and we see Avasarala torturing a Belter, which is, and she comes off as a really evil, sort of despicable person who goes on a redemption arc, and I think this is where that kicks it off. And we also see Miller as a dirty cop who doesn't really give a shit, who's given this kidnap job with Julie Mala, is slowly going to change him. So it's good setup, and it's really intense at the end. So I like this episode. I'm not sure why it would be so low rated. Anyway, we'll get into my number 33, Season 4, Episode 5, Oppressor. Now, this sort of carries off of the other Season 4 episode I was just talking about, where Holden comes into town, where Amos is being held prisoner and the whole town's in lockdown, but he doesn't give a shit. He just comes in, throws his weight around because he knows that he's a UN representative, so they won't dare kill him, and sort of just pushes Mercury around, tells him to do stuff. But then he reveals to Mercury when he shows up, and I love that there was about to be this showdown between Holden and Wade, but Mercury shows up, and Mercury says that he tells Mercury immediately that the alien technology is about to kill everyone and the planet needs to be evacuated, which goes along with his plans, because he wants the Belters off the planet, which is what Holden's suggesting. So he decides to go along with this. Of course, the Belters are not eager to leave the planet, and they realize that Mercury is going to use this opportunity to kick them off, and they don't want that, so they refuse to go. They take hostages, and so Holden and Mercury seem to be on the same side temporarily, but Holden really just wants to de-escalate the situation, which Mercury's not really doing. So that was all really intense stuff there. We do get continuation on Bobby Draper's storyline as she becomes more of gets involved with the criminal underworld, because she was arrested in the previous episode for confessing to what she did, but she joins up with the dirty cop, and so he gets her off, and she starts to become involved with the black market sale. So it was a really interesting character turn for her. And of course, the episode ends with Holden confessing that he's talking to Miller and trying to soothe both sides and get them to cooperate, but they won't. They just yell at each other. So it's pretty intense. So yeah, so that's a good episode. So next, we'll move over to my number 32, which is Season 5, Episode 3, Mother. So this is the episode where Naomi goes off to find her son Philip, and she actually sees him for the first time ever since he was a baby, and it was a really intense scene. Of course, Philip feels like she abandoned him, and doesn't take too kindly to that. And of course, Philip is now part of the Free Navy with the other people, Sen and Corral, who Corral sort of hates Naomi, and they end up abducting her and stealing her ship, which was very, very intense stuff. Meanwhile, Avasarala realizes that there's asteroids with stealth technology coming to Earth to kill them all, but no one will listen to her. It's kind of the Cassandra complex, which I don't know, that kind of annoys me at times, but it does make sense because she lost an election, and the person that she lost to is now in charge and kind of doesn't want to take her seriously. So it's frustrating, but it's also understandable and intense. And then, of course, things heat up with Holden and Fred Johnson on Tycho as they realize there's a conspiracy and a plot to overthrow Johnson, and they take steps to try to combat this. which is pretty intense. And of course, Alex continues his investigation of the evil Martians, and so goes out on a date with someone who's clearly just trying to get information out of him, and it ends with and as soon as the date's over, these people show up and try to kill him, and Draper, but Draper shows up and saves the day. So that was pretty intense stuff. As well, and of course, the whole episode ends with the asteroid actually hitting Earth, which was super intense. So next, we will get into my number 31, Season 2, Episode 8, Pyre. So this is the introduction of the character of Prax, and he's introduced in an extremely powerful way with the destruction of Ganymede around him, losing his daughter, and waking up on a refugee ship with his a friend, a scientist that he works with, who just so happens to be an Earther, who is then promptly thrown out into space and executed just for being an Earther. And god damn it, that was such an intense, such a powerful, such a sad scene. And then of course Prax is traumatized by this and tries to report it, but Holden and Naomi are investigating Dr. Strickland and his ties to Protogen and Protomolecule, and they tie him to Prax. When they see Prax, they approach him, and he freaks out, thinking that he's, it has something to do with the reporting the Belters who killed the Earthers, but it turns out that it's not, and so they think Prax is involved, but he's not. He's just an innocent scientist, and so they realize he asks for their help to find his daughter. Also, this is when the Black Skies faction of the OPA tries to kill Fred Johnson, take over Tycho Station in order to launch the missiles at Earth, which will surely get them all killed and won't really accomplish anything. And so they take the command center of Tycho hostage. They shoot Drummer, and has a way to entice Fred Johnson to cooperate, but he doesn't, of course, and as soon as Amos and Alex learn about this, they spring into action with Holden and Naomi's help, of course, and are able to disable everyone in the command center. And this is when we first realized just how amazing of a character Drummer is, where she was shot, so she was really injured, but she was exaggerating her injuries and having Alex sort of carry her in order to steal his gun so she could just shoot the two people that took this hostage situation, were responsible for the hostage situation, the traitor who worked for Fred Johnson and the other Black Skies guy who shot her. And she just takes Alex's gun and shoots them both in the head and just walks off. What an amazing moment. But it does end with Fred Johnson being pissy with Holden and telling him he's not allowed to come back for Tycho for, in my opinion, no good reason. So that part of it kind of irritated me. But yes, still a really good, still a really intense episode. Alright, so now we come to my number 30, and if you haven't noticed, we're now getting into the episodes that I really, really, really like. As I said, there's a lot of great episodes of The Expanse. So this is my top 30, so this is the top 30 of them, so don't take that lightly. And this is 8.5 rating, so nearly a 9, in between an 8 and a 9, so this is getting into the episodes that I really, really like. So let us begin with my number 30, which is Season 5, Episode 1, Exodus. So Exodus is the episode where that begins Season 5, and he begins it in grand old fashion. Does a really good job of setting things up, where we get Amos going to Earth. We get the intense scene of where he's on the transport to Earth, and there's the shakedown with Belters trying to shake down the cabin he's in. He refuses to pay and ends up beating the shit out of them, and actually takes enjoyment out out of it. That's cool. And we also get the scene with him and Avasarala. I love when the UN military picks up Amos when he arrives on Luna, and he is like, what? I didn't kill them. They were alive when I left. But it actually had nothing to do with that. It's just Avasarala wanted to talk to him because she assumed he was there on Earth for something Holden wanted to do, but in fact had nothing to do with that. And this is, of course, when he first starts calling her Chrissy, and she's like, I'm a member of Parliament, not your favorite stripper. And he's like, you can be both. Like that. That's really good stuff. And then also in this episode we get, well, I really like it a lot. We get this really emotional, intense scene where Naomi, Fred Johnson tells Naomi where Philip is, and then she decides to go out on her own, and poor Holden, because he's like, okay, when are we leaving? And he's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I am going, you're not. And he just can't accept that. He's like, what if I just stay on the ship? But of course that doesn't work for Naomi. And it was a really emotional scene where she's like really explaining to him how she has to do this on her own, and Holden has to basically let it go and realize that he needs to trust her. Although in retrospect you could say this was not a good decision on her part, and maybe she shouldn't have went at all, but it was still a really emotional scene. And then of course we get Alex having his door slammed in his face too when he tries to check in on his ex, who does not want to talk to him at all. Does not want him in her or her son's life at all. But and Alex tries to reconnect with his son as well, who's not too big on it, and he tries to reconnect with his friend Bobby Draper, who also is not very kind to him because she's too preoccupied with her investigation as well. So that doesn't go well. It was a pretty intense episode for those reasons. So next, we will move over to my number 29, The One-Eyed Man, Season 4, Episode 8. It was me. It was the One-Eyed Man. Sorry, I was thinking about that. But anyway, so this is the Death Slug. I love the Death Slug. So this is the Death Slug episode where just things are really, really shitty for Holden and the other colonists, as they're all trapped underground. They've all gone blind except for Holden, and there's death slugs just littered around the compound that will kill them in the instant they touch it. And things, and they're running out of food, they're running out of water, so things are very, very bleak. And we get some really powerful scenes where Amos loses his shit and basically tries to kill himself because he can't deal with being so helpless. And Holden tries to stop him, but Amos tries to beat the shit out of him. But luckily for Holden, Amos is blind, which gives Holden the advantage. But they had that moment where they reconnect, and he reassures Amos that it's okay. That's a really great character moment for Amos, and it really helps strengthen and establish just the bond between Amos and Holden, which as I mentioned before, I think season 1 did a poor job at, but I think this really solidifies the bond between them. So that was an amazing moment as well. And back in the Sol system, we get the storyline with the aftermath of the fuck up that Avasarala did with destroying the civilian ship. Drummer is pissed at Fred Johnson for giving the UN the information of where to find Marco, because the UN kind of fucked it up. And then Fred Johnson blamed the UN for the disaster, and that also pisses Drummer off because it feeds into Marco's narrative, and it's just gonna get more support for Marco. And she's totally right. And so she punches Fred Johnson. I love how she sucker punches Fred Johnson too, where he shows up, oh hi, it's good to meet you, and she's whining behind Ashford and just pops out and knocks him out. That was funny. That was pretty cool. And then she resigns in protest, which was pretty intense, and Ashford announces that he's going to go on a hunt for Marco and invites Drummer along, but Drummer of course does not go. But yeah, so that was all pretty intense stuff, and then of course it got intense back on Ellis as well when they did finally find a cure through Holden's. They figured out the reason why he was immune was because of his cancer meds, so they could just whip up cancer meds. So it does end on a positive note. And also in orbit, the ships are starting to fly out of orbit, but Lucia comes up with a plan to tether the Baba Bacola so it doesn't fall in order to save her daughter. So yeah, all pretty intense, good stuff. So now we'll move over to my number 38, which, I'm sorry, 28. I'm sorry, not going that down. Well, number 28, which is Down and Out, Season 5, Episode 5. I always want to say Down and Out in Beverly Hills. But anyway, Down and Out deals with the aftermath of the asteroids hitting Earth. And is where Amos is stuck underground with the prison, and he has to try to negotiate to get Clarissa out and try to work with some guards, and the guards get this big muscle man prisoner who's on these mods. And it's pretty intense, especially when the guy just kills one of the guards, randomly throws him off the ladder and says, "Oh, he fell." Whereas obviously he killed him, but they still need his help to escape as soon as they get to the surface. And they're all awed about the devastation, how everything is destroyed. And they didn't realize just how bad the disaster was. But the muscle man takes advantage of this and to kill the guards and try to break free. And he, tries to kill Amos. He's like, "Call me Tiny again." Amos just loves his nicknames, get him in trouble. And but the guard manages to grab the gun from the other guard, and even though it's keyed into their own hand, so you're only allowed to operate your own gun, but she uses the hand of the guard in order to operate the gun. Very smart. And then Amos does kicks the dude in the nads and does a suplex move to throw him down the well, that was really awesome. And then Amos and slide talks the surviving guard to let Clarissa go. It's just go visit your family. You're fine. I'll take care of her. And so that was all pretty intense. Pretty powerful stuff as well. And we get some other great scenes with Naomi on the Pella being held captive by Marco, and she's just devastated and realizing the devastation where they're all just being cheers. And the way Marco kind of fucks with her, whereas where she asked for her ship back so she can leave, it was "Oh, you gave that ship to Philip. Philip, do you want to give her your ship?" He's like, "No." And then Sen's kind of pissed off with that dynamic because he doesn't like that they're fucking with her like that. But it also gets really intense where after Fred Johnson's death, Holden tries to get the Rocinante crew back together so he can go out hunting after the people who stole the molecule. But there's a bomb, or there's a sabotage, of course, like Sakai's sabotage the Rocinante. And a lot of people sort of say, why is Holden so stupid not realizing that she sabotaged the Rocinante? Because they checked. They checked everything, but they're using the same code Naomi came up with that Marco used to destroy the ship back in the day, which is why she left him in the first place. And that code is more ingenious and hard and impossible to detect, which is why they didn't detect it. So they did check Sakai's work, but of course they weren't counting on this ingenious code. But Naomi learns of this and beats the crap out of Sen, steals the sand terminal in order to contact Holden. That was super intense. Last minute save, of course, where she's yells at Holden not, and this is of course also informing Holden that she's being held captive by Marco, which he did not know. So it was a very intense, powerful scene on several levels, and they powered down the reactor just in time. So really great stuff. So next, we will move over to my number 27, Abaddon's Gate, Season 3, Episode 13. Now, I do really like this episode. It was a super intense episode. where Holden has to team up with Drummer and Naomi in order to stop Ashford from what he thinks is doing the right thing by destroying the ring gate, because he thinks it's going to save everyone in the Soul System, but Holden actually knows that it's going to doom them all to death, and so he's desperate to save humanity, so the stakes are extremely high, and they get the help of Drummer and try to take over the reactor core, but then Diallo and a couple of the other Ashford supporters get the Martian suits and battle armor and which is pretty impossible to defeat, and start ripping through Holden's people. So it's a really intense scene, and it's so satisfying when Naomi crushes Diallo with the elevator. And then, of course, at the same time, Pastor Anna is trying to get support, get everyone in the ring space to shut down the reactor, and while she's doing this broadcast, Ashford tries to get the Martians to shut down the broadcast, and Amos and Alex try to protect this, and this leads to conflict with Bobby Draper because she's sent to stop them. And when Alex and Bobby try to talk it out, the other two Martian assholes just start shooting at them. And it leads to Bobby getting shot and having to take down her own people. So that was really intense. And the ending sequence where the ring space opens when they finally get where Clarissa takes down Ashford and they finally open the ring space was amazing. I love the music and the awe of the moment, seeing all the ring gates open and revealing that now they have access to the entire freaking galaxy, and just it gives me goosebumps at the ending scene there. Now, I do feel like I need to talk about why this is only number 27 on my list, because most lists will have this in the top 3. I think it is number 3 on IMDb. I saw a top 10 list where it was number 1. Almost every top 10 list I've seen, this was in the top 5 at least, and it's only number 27 on my list, so I feel like I need to address that. If you're familiar with my channel at all, you probably know what I'm about to say. Even though I do think this is a good episode, it was very powerful, suspenseful. There's a lot of issues I have with it. For example, the turn of Clarissa was not earned at all. It felt like it was out of nowhere where she decided to turn on Ashford and take him down. And it also really bugged me that Drummer... She's the captain of the ship, technically. Ashford's like, oh, you're not the captain anymore, but that's only because she was injured. If she's moving around, at the very least, she should have support amongst the crew, where everyone seems to support Ashford, and that makes no sense to me. In fact, the Martians and the UN should recognize Drummer as the captain of the ship and support her, so that never jived to me. But these are all... And Anna, her cries for help seems a bit like... I know my sister compared her to Sally Struthers, like, oh, help us. Where these are all issues that all have to do with the underlining issue, which I know people accuse me of being a book nerd, but this is the bad adaptation, frankly. Even though it's still a good, decent episode, I find this suspenseful. After having read the books and having seen how well this was done, this was incredibly rushed. They tried to cram an entire half of the book, which, by the way, was my favorite book of the entire series, and they tried to cram it into 2 episodes, and I don't think it worked. They left out a lot of crucial moments. And so, for example, when Ashford shoots Grigori in the face, that moment in the books was Ashford was a different character, the person he shot was a different character, and it totally worked. It was so suspenseful. And the show doesn't really make sense, because then they instantly forgive Ashford, which always bothered the hell out of me. Why they forgive him for shooting Grigori in the face when Grigori was actually correct. And but now he's instantly forgiven. And and there is a key character who's missing from the books who would have made Clarissa's storyline and Anna's storyline so much better, Father Cortez. And I think it was a huge mistake to omit him from the show. Well, he was like a side character who left early on, but he wasn't the same character. They needed him to flesh out Anna's storyline. Clarissa's storyline, her turn to help Holden at the end was so earned, so well done in the books that I literally put the book down to clap when she turned. Whereas in the show, it's like came out of nowhere. So I know people accuse, because so many people love this episode and they accuse me of being a book nerd who's like, oh, you just like the books, which is totally not true. I will flat out say right here, I think the show, I mean, I like them both a lot, don't get me wrong, but I do like the show better. And when I get to my top 20, particularly my top 10, these are all episodes that I think the show did way better than the books. In fact, I would say seasons 2, 4, 5, and 6 are all better than their book counterparts. Season 3 is the exception. I think they kind of mishandled it, and I do think book 3 is way better than the material they covered in season 3. But overall, I think the show actually did a much better job, particularly when it comes to Naomi's storyline, than the books did. So the accusations of me being the book nerd who's just, oh, you just like the books, is objectively false. It is totally not the case. I just have a different opinion on this, and this probably has to do with the fact that book 3 was my favorite book, and I feel like this show does not live up to it at all. And I also didn't mention the fact, like, in this scene, this episode is a simple chase scene where Holden and Drummer are running from Ashford, where in the book it was like a civil war. It was much more involved, much more bloody. There was a lot of, like, and they kind of, this is like the doled down version of it, where, I don't mind in principle, but as I said, it doesn't make sense that because Drummer's the captain, so why isn't she getting more support? Like, this irks me. So, and don't get me wrong, this is still 8.5, and it's still number 27 on my list, so I still do really like this episode, because it is in the highest part on my list, but I couldn't in good conscience put it in my top 10 because I don't think it's a good adaptation. But anyway, let me move on from that. Let me get into... hold on 1 second. Let me get into number 26 on my list, which is going to be Season 1, Episode 8, Salvage. So this was a pretty intense episode. This is when the Rosnate crew go to the asteroid to look for Lionel Palance, and they find the Anubis, the ship that Julie Mao was on, that was taken over by Protomolecule, and it's a very creepy, sort of haunted scene. And they get the spy, what's his, Kinko, whatever the hell his name is, and Amos is sort of being a dick to him, and they're helping him, like, retrieve the safe from the ship and the information. But they turn on the reactor core and they see the Protomolecule, and they start to freak out because it's their first introduction to it, and that was extremely intense. And we also get Miller arriving at Eros to reminisce with Samatemba, and I love what they did with these characters. Again, another example where the show was better than the books, where it's where they fleshed their relationship out more, where apparently they were used to be thugs and they both decided to be cops together, but Samatemba got censured out to the ass end of nowhere, which is Eros. But now Miller needs his help to find Julie, and he does help them, and this leads and Holden's, of course, investigation of the Anubis. They discovered the shuttle went to Eros, so this leads them both to the same place, to the hotel. And god damn it, I gotta take a moment to talk about this scene at the hotel lobby, where it was such a well done scene. It was Tarantino-esque is how I would describe it. It was just super intense. There was so much subtext where Holden and Naomi were completely oblivious to the fact that there was a clear strike team that was there to take them down, but Amos spotted it right away because he knows exactly what to look for, and he could also tell that the spy dude was being very, very nervous, and that he knew that there was a strike team coming, so he was being very obvious about it. But Amos couldn't tell Holden or the others without alerting the strike team to their presence there, so he just slowly reached into his coat to bring up the gun and get ready for it. And it was such an intense moment. I cannot understate just how amazing I thought that moment was. And then Miller, of course, shows up to save the day because he's going there as well. And then the two of them meet, and they're like, "Who the fuck are you?" And they go up to Julie's room and find that she's completely taken over by protomolecule. And this is protomolecule mess, which was super intense. So yeah, I love this episode. I think it's really good. Alright, so now we delve even deeper into my favorite episodes. We're getting into my top 25 now, with my 9 rated episodes. Episode I give 9 out of 10, so that's not to be underestimated. So now we'll get into my number 25, which is season 6, episode 4, Readout. So, this is the episode in season 6 that sort of covers the Rocinante after the aftermath of Holden not detonating the missile that killed Marco, because Amos finds this out and of course is not too pleased and confronts him about it, which was a super intense scene where Amos very honestly says, "I don't even know if I can do this anymore, because what's the point?" And then you get the scene where Holden confesses to Naomi that he didn't detonate the missile, particularly purposely not to kill Philip, because he could not stand to be the man who killed the person he loves son. He just couldn't do it. And she's very upset about this and says that he's trying to make decisions for her, but he's just trying to tell her plainly that he just doesn't have it in him. And that was all pretty intense. But then you had that amazing scene with Clarissa telling Holden not to feel guilty about killing, to never feel bad about choosing not to kill someone. And that was such a very powerful, emotional scene that really got to me. I thought it was extremely good. Now, this episode, it would have been higher on my list, but it had a storyline with Philip making friends with this belter, who his brother was left on series, whatever, as they like clean up, repair the ship, whatever. And I mean, it's okay. I mean, the storyline is helpful in pushing Philip to where he arrives at in the finale, but it was dragged on way too long, in my opinion, and it wasted too much time, and we didn't really need it. But we also get, and the reason I still have it so high, and it's still a 9 and in my top 25, is because we also get the scenes with Drummer, where she executes the heist and steals Marco's shit, and one of her lovers, Joseph, loses his arm in a very, very intense scene. But the thing I remember this episode the most for, the reason why I love this episode the most, is the speech. Drummer's message to Marco, the traitor, the coward, Marco and Howard. It's such an intense moment. It's like a get up and cheer. I was like, yeah! Where she really just berates him and says, die. What was it saying? Live shamed, die empty. I mean, that was such a power. And the fact that was going out to the belt, and she was like, no matter, you can go hunt me, send people to kill me, but it won't change the fact that I did this to you. It was just the biggest sort of FU that she could possibly give to Marco, and it's gave her a lot of support. A lot of people saw that and like, yes, Marco is abandoning the people about. He is hoarding food, and it makes Drummer come off as the better option, as the hero. And as we see in the next episode, she does gain support and become an important person. And that was just such an amazing speech, and I love it so much. So that's why it's this high. It's not higher because of that Philip stuff was kind of boring. But anyway, let me now get into my number 24, which is season 2, episode 1, Safe. So this episode begins season 2 in grand old fashion. We deal with the aftermath of leaving Illis behind, where Miller and Holden are barely survived and have to take cancer meds for the rest of their lives. And more importantly, we get the integration of Miller into the crew, which was done very well. There was, of course, conflict at first because Miller hated Amos for, shooting his best friend in the head. And we get a nice scene with Miller and Naomi where Naomi tries to relate with him as a belter, and eventually we had that dinner scene where they're eating dinner and talking about this cheese thief, and Miller starts joining in, and Amos sort of clears the space at the table so he can sit down. They all enjoy a meal and become like a good crew, which was a really touching moment, a really nice moment. But also in this episode, you get them actually opening the safe that they found on the Anubis and getting all the dirt background information on the protomolecule project. I think this is when they first actually learned the name protomolecule, and that it was its background. That was something that was discovered on Phoebe, and that they're using this in experiments. And also they find out where the transmissions are being sent to, so they have a target now, so they need to return to Tycho to gather people to enact this target. So that was also very intense. And of course we also get the threat on Avasarala's life, and we see the double life that she's leading, as she's pretending to be a hard ass who's blaming everything on the belt, where behind the scenes she's working to uncover the conspiracy that Aaron Wright is having. But then the belt extremists try to execute her anyway, which is super intense. And then we also get the introduction of Bobby Draper in this episode, which was a great introduction, and showed them how she was like hated the UN and is just ready for war, which is a great contrast to where her journey will take her after this. So yes, pretty amazing episode. So now we'll move over to my number 23, which is Season 4, Episode 1, New Terror. Now, this is a great introduction to Season 4, and I must admit, like, watching the show in order, going from Season 3 to 4 was a huge jump. Like, you can see, like, the cinematic quality, like, just the quality in the cameras they use, the quality of picture, the quality of sound is just really, really much higher. And, the showrunners will swear up and down that the budget of the show hasn't changed. They just learned more how to make it. But this is a vast jump over the previous 3 seasons. Not in terms of storytelling, but in terms of just picture quality and sound quality. And I think they used like better cameras for this. Way more expensive cameras, so maybe they just used the budget better, I suppose, if their budget didn't change. But also it felt like a meta sort of love letter to the show, because this is after the show. This was when the show was revived for Amazon, because it was canceled after Season 3, and there's a big campaign to keep it on the air or get it back. And this is kind of the love letter saying that yes, we did. And it does feel like, even maybe not in universe, but it feels like a reintroduction to the characters. Honestly, watching this episode, it feels like watching a movie that's based off of a show, like that continues a show, like Serenity was to Firefly, or Star Trek Generations was to the Next Generation. It has that feeling of reintroducing to your characters that you're familiar with, but in a much more cinematic way. And I do think this is Season 4 overall is way more cinematic, even than Seasons 5 and 6. I think this is definitely the sort of the most picturesque season. And this show certainly does start off. I mean, this episode, in grand old fashion, you get the Rosnate on Earth. You see Holden talking to his mother. You see his parents being very awkward with Naomi, which was cool. And then you see Amos sort of talking to Clarissa for the first time, which is setting up the off-screen stuff, apparently, where Amos befriended Clarissa, of course will set up their storyline Seasons 5 and 6. And you have the crash on Illis, where the terrorist attack, where Mercury and you were introduced to Mercury and Elvie, and their ship is destroyed, which was super intense. Like, the way this was filmed was just so good and so intense. I had you on the edge of the seat. Also, I didn't even mention the way the whole episode opens with the Belter ships like charging the gate and going through was like one of the best like cinematic sort of intense like chase scenes the show has done. It was just a grand way to open up the season. So that's why New Terra is so high on my list. So next we will get into my number 22, which is season 2, episode 4, Godspeed. Now, this was a great setup episode, as it sets up the situation in Illis, where they're trying to ram the Nauvoo into, not Illis, Eros, I'm getting my planets confused. Eros, they're trying to ram the Nauvoo into Eros to knock it into the sun to wipe out the proto molecule, and Miller has to convince Holden to go along with this plan. Of course, at first, Holden wants nothing to do with Miller, but they convince them, and then we get this side plot, which I thought was very emotional, very so the kind of like heartstringies that the Expanse likes to pull on by posing these moral quandaries, where there's a relief effort by like basically Doctors Without Borders, who are trying to rescue people in Eros, but Holden realizes that there's no rescue for them, and that all they're going to do is risk spreading this contamination, which they absolutely cannot risk. And Holden tries to reason with him, but he won't be reasoned with, and he tries to tell the whole solar system about it, which Holden very wisely knows is very dangerous and he can't allow that to happen. And so he tries to reason with this captain, and he can't do it, and eventually he has to destroy their ship. He has to kill all these well-meaning doctors, and it's such a sad, intense scene, the way Holden's like, God damn it! Like, he was so upset over it. It was just like so powerful. And then of course Miller and Diego get hit by the debris field from the ship, so they're in this impossible situation where they're stuck with the bomb, where they have to keep their hand on it, otherwise it will explode and ruin their entire plan. So Miller tells Diego to go back to the ship, and he will remain behind to sacrifice himself, which is again a very tear-jerking moment. It's a very, very sad moment, but is followed by the super intense moment where we see the Nauvoo pop up over. We see Miller sitting on Eros, and the Nauvoo pop up over, and it's such an intense scene. The Nauvoo's like huge and getting bigger, and just flies right past Eros. And Miller's like, why did Nauvoo miss? And Holden's like, the Nauvoo didn't move, Eros did, which sets up a huge episode, which of course I'll get to later on my list. But yeah, really powerful, really great episode. So next we'll move over to my number 21, Azure Dragon, season 6, episode 2. So this is when they actually go to execute the plan to attack the Belter ships that's guiding all the asteroids into Earth in order to free up the UN fleet. And it was such an intense, one of my favorite battle scenes, seeing the Rosnate trying to catch up to the ship but not destroy it. So they're just like sort of playing with each other while the ship is trying to burn the Rosnate in this drive plume, where the Rosnate is trying to get close enough to it so they can board it. Holden just wanted to destroy the ship, but Bobby Draper was in command of the mission and ordered him not to. And to see her like Amos and Naomi and Clarissa like pinned to the floor because the ship was moving so fast, but Bobby Draper's just casually walking around in her Martian battle armor was pretty cool. But then it also dealt with Naomi's PTSD, which makes all the sense in the world because she experienced a lot of trauma through the events of season 5, and I'm glad they addressed this. I'm glad they showed the similarities of her trying to jump on the ship and how that reminded her of jumping onto the Chesmoka without a vac suit, and how it caused her to have a panic attack, which is the most real thing in the world. It's a great character moment, and I love how Holden was like, "Are you okay?" And she says, "Yeah, I'm all right." And he's like, "Are you really all right, or you just not want to talk about it all right?" And she's like, "Yeah, that second one." And I love how Holden, it shows his character growth, that he was willing to let it go. And it's like, okay, and gave her space that she needed. It's like, it's what makes their relationship so great. But then we also got a great moment because when Naomi had her panic attack, Clarissa stepped up, jumped on the ship, and was there to protect Bobby. And then later we get Holden telling Clarissa off for not going through the chain of command, but she was just like tearing, crying, and so happy. And Amos is like, "You realize you just got chewed out?" She's like, "He just said I was part of the crew." And that was such a nice moment. Such a great episode. And this is also the episode where Drummer meets Walker for the first time, which is an amazing character. He's like, "Marco is intimidated by me sexually." Like, what a great character. And this is when Drummer first hatches her plan to do the heist, so that stuff was all great as well. And then, of course, they actually get Amos and Holden actually get the information from the Azure Dragon that allows the UN fleet to free up, and Marco's actually happy about this. He's like, "Let them come." Really great stuff. So yeah, really like this episode. Alright, so now we will move over to number 20 on my list. Getting into the top 20 now. We're getting really serious now. Top 20, which is number 20 is season 2, episode 11, Here There Be Dragons. So I'm not going to beat around the bush with this episode. This is mainly the episode where Bobby Draper beats the shit out of her commanding officer, Martins, because she finds out that he participated in experiments for the proto-molecule hybrid and killed her whole team. And god damn it, that was such an intense scene where he's like, "You'll hang for this." She's like, "Yeah, sure, later, but right now I'm just kicking your ass." And so she just beats the loving snot out of him and gets him to confess what was actually going on. So he shows her the promo for the proto-molecule hybrid and just how callous they were. He's like, "It's for the good of Mars," and he's trying to say, "You young people are so blah blah blah," and she just knocks the shit out of him. And then it's one of my favorite scenes in the entire show when she runs for the UN compound, and we get that beautiful shot where we see the line of the Mars compound and neutral territory and then the UN compound, and seeing her run across that while the Martian soldiers are chasing her, and she runs up to the UN and wins down and begs for asylum. One of my favorite scenes of any show, really. It was such a super intense scene, which is why this episode is up so high, to be frank, because the rest of the episode is good, but nothing special, nothing great. Most of it is like just set up, although we do get a really great storyline with Holden and the crew on Ganymede trying to track down Prax's daughter, but they find like a group of the protogen scientists just sitting there casually eating pizza. And they had a tense standoff where Holden's like, "Drop your guns," and she's like, "That's not going to happen." And then Prax fucks it all up because he just sees May's backpack and is like, "Where's May?" And everyone starts shooting at each other. And then, so they hunker down in a different compartment, but they try to throw, the Protogen people try to throw a grenade in, and I love how Amos just like freaks out, like, "Grenade!" and throws it back in them, and it's such a creepy scene where you don't actually see what's going on in the room. The camera is on Amos and Holden and their crew as they listen, and they have all the sound effects of like the grenade exploding and this creature being set loose, and the creature starts ripping people apart, and then rips open the door, and you hear an alarm going as the space door is ripped open, like, and they're just listening to all this being like, "What the fuck is going on?" Like, that was such a good creepy scene. And then when they go to investigate, of course, it confirms, and they had that woman scientist who's dying and being indigent and like refusing to tell him, and Holden tries to get her to tell, and she's like, sort of, the cliche of the dying person given away, but she just says that they crossed proto-molecule with humans, trying to make them in their own image to the hybrids, setting up for this whole storyline. So that was good stuff as well, but the Bobby Draper stuff, really amazing. This is why it makes my top 20. Anyway, we'll go ahead and move over to my number 19, which is a season 1, episode 10, Leviathan Wakes, the finale of season 1, which was really freaking awesome. Really intense finale where we see Holden and Miller trapped on the Aero Station and like struggling from their lives, trying to go through where they've been radiated. They're on a ticking clock. They're on borrowed time. They're dying from radiation, and they have to get through all these goons. And I love how Miller just casually kills people, and then Holden freaks out when he sees the spy, and doesn't actually kill him, but leaves him for dead and refuses to take him with him in a very intense scene. And then Miller does this trickery to get the Protogen people in the series thugs to fight amongst themselves so they could slip through them. That was a pretty intense scene as well. But you also get the storyline of Naomi and Amos and Alex trying to get back to the Rosinante with a group of Belter refugees and Simatimba. And Simatimba and Amos kind of bond because they're both more pragmatic, less sentimental, and until they get to the Rosinante where Naomi insists that they wait for Holden and Miller, but Simatimba says that it's dangerous and that they need to leave immediately, and he insists to the point where he pulls a gun on Naomi. Now, Amos agreed with Simatimba up to the point where he pulled a gun on Naomi, which is a huge no-no because Amos just casually shoots him in the head, and then the blood just splatters on Naomi's face, and he's like, "You're okay, boss," and he's very nonchalant about it. It really portrays the kind of character that Amos is, that he was actually agreed with Simatimba, but as soon as he pulled a gun on Naomi, that was it. He's like, he just signed his own death warrant, and that was just such an intense scene. But then you also get when Miller actually and Holden make it to the airlock, but there seems no one's there, and Miller sees the vision of Julie, and he's like, beautiful, but it turns out to be Amos, and Amos is like, you guys look like shit, and just takes him on the ship. Yeah, that was an amazing, and just seeing the horror of Eros. And then we get more information about the scientists, and Jules Pierre Mal is involved, and Ava Sperella, of course, uncovers the conspiracy and realizes that her friend was murdered because he uncovered the truth about the stealth ships that they were built by Jules Pierre Mal and Mal Korkowski Mercantile, and that he's involved, and that she sees him with Aaron Wright and realizes that they're in cahoots and that she has to go undercover to try to uncover this conspiracy. Really great stuff. So really loved the finale of season 1. So yeah, so then we get into number 18 on my list, sticking with season 1, is season 1 episode 4, CBQ, the first really great intense episode of the show in my opinion, where of course the Canterbury survivors are still being held on the Dollinger, but the Dollinger is being approached by these Belter ships, which are all stupid Belter ships. We can just wipe them out easily. But it turned out to be the Protogen stealth ships that can actually beat the shit out of the Dollinger, and they were shocked. They were like, had no idea that they could lose. And then, of course, we get the death of Shed in this episode, and Shed was the main character up to this point. This is only episode 4, though, so it wasn't the main character for very long. But it's funny to realize that I've learned recently, because I knew before that The Expanse was originally based off of a tabletop role-playing game until Ty Frank got with Dave Abraham, who suggested they make it into novels, so they wrote the novels. But it was originally based off of tabletop, like a role-playing game. In the role-playing game, there was a player who was playing Shed who apparently had to drop out of the game, which is why they killed the character off. And it's funny that they kept that in the show, because I think it did give a really Game of Thrones-esque feel to it, especially the season 1 when you're not familiar with the show at all. It gives a feel that no character is safe and any character can die at any moment. And this is the nonchalant way that just this head just blew right off during the battle really just like proved how dangerous space was. And it was just such a powerful moment. And Holden, of course, stuck up for his crew, and it really showed that he was bonding with his crew, and that he absolutely insisted that the Martians go for them, and eventually they did, and the Martians got them to safely. And then we had that amazing scene where they're running towards the Rosinante and they're being shot at by all of the goons, and they lose gravity. They go into 0G, and so Holden and Naomi just start floating away, and Holden does this trick where he kicks Naomi off so he's able to push back down to the to the floor, and then pulls Naomi back to him while they're being shot at. It was such a great scene, such an amazing scene, such an intense moment. So yeah, love this episode. Alright, so next we will move over to my number 17. Pretty high on my list, number 17, which is going to be Season 3, Episode 6, Immolation, which is pretty much wrapping up the storyline with the proto-molecule hybrids in really intense fashion, while Bobby Draper has to confront her worst demons and chase down the hybrid by herself in order to buy time for Holden and Amos to rescue the kids. And of course, you got to talk about one of the best lines, maybe the best line in the entire show, where Dr. Strickland is trying to be a sleazy asshole, but Prax and Amos can see right through him, and Prax is going to shoot him in the head. But Amos shows up and realizes that Prax should not go through that he's not a killer, so he keeps calmly telling Prax, you're not that guy, you're not that guy. And as soon as Prax leaves, Strickland's like, oh, thank you, and Amos turns to him with that evil look in his eyes like, I am that guy. Classic one-liner of the Expanse. Absolutely amazing moment. And then, of course, you have Alex and Naomi going over to the doomed Thomas Prince, which is infected by the proto-molecule, where, and this is one of my favorite scenes too, where Alex and Naomi are on the CIC trying to disable the proto-molecule modules, which are on their way to infect and destroy Mars, and Admiral Wynn is just sitting there taunting them and being like, you Martians are all ants and scum, and Alex is like, God bless his heart, I may actually have to shoot this son of a bitch, but Naomi holds him back. But the whole time I love like this stuff, because Admiral Wynn is sitting there like dying, and he knows he's gonna die, but he's just like taunting and smiling. In fact, when a Kotiar like sets off the reactor that's gonna destroy the ship, Admiral Wynn just starts laughing his ass off. It was such a creepy moment, and I love that so much. And also Kotiar's death, I was kind of pissed off they killed this character. I liked him so much. It was sad to see him go, but it's such a great death. It's like I thought I would have some great last words, maybe something pithy, but I can't think of a damn thing. It just sets off the reactor. It's like that was a beautiful moment as well. And of course, seeing Aaron Wright go down and whining like a little bitch that he is as Anna presents the evidence that will take. And that was a creepy scene too, because Anna's like, oh, Sorrento Gillis, you did the right thing, thanks for being a good man. And he's like, oh no, thank you saved my legacy. Now everyone's just gonna blame him for that. And he shows what a despicable asshole he is too. So that was pretty intense. And of course, seeing the beautiful montage we get at the end, where it shows Prax reunited with May. It shows like Jules Pierre Mal kneeling before Alpha Sorella, and it ends with the big protomolecule thingy on Venus just rising up out and just floating off into space, and Amos going, what the fuck? Intense moment, great moment. Now again, this is another episode I kind of had to address why it's not so high on my list, because it is high. It is a 9 out of 10. It's number 17 on my list, which is a pretty freaking high number, especially considering how great all the episodes of The Expanse are. But it is number 1 on IMDb. It's usually in the top 3 of most people's countdowns. But and I have some slight issues with it. Again, it's in my top 20, so I still love it to death. But some of it was a bit anticlimactic with Holden taking Jules Pierre Mal captive. And again, I gotta mention the B word, the books, because Alva Sorrell is kind of just a bystander in this episode, whereas in the book she was like the mastermind puppet master controlling all the strings. So I think that really disappointed me because I love Avasarala, and seemed like a missed opportunity for her to actually do something instead of just sitting on the ship and watching everything happen. But whatever. It was still a great episode. I still love I am that guy, and the whole Admiral Wynn being a creepy asshole. Good stuff. So now let me get into my number 16, which is season 4, episode 10, Cibola Burn. So the season finale of season 4, which this kind of grew on me because this actually is called Cibola Burn, but it doesn't actually cover much of the events of the books. It's mostly about the other storylines having to do with like Bobby Draper and Ashford and Avasarala. This is when Avasarala loses her election. But it also wraps up the storyline on Illis where Holden and Amos are rescued by Naomi. We see LV in the aftermath of going through the artifact and how fucked up that was. And then I love this scene where Naomi's talking to Holden, saying it's a shame that Lucia is not going to get a chance for redemption. He's like, oh yeah, I agree. It's a real tragedy since she died floating out into space. Sort of code for Naomi that he's going to lie to the UN and tell her that she died so she can actually go back and live with their family. And how Naomi caught on immediately and started hugging him. Like that really got me right there. Really great scene. And of course, seeing everything resolved on Illis, we see the LV getting the whole planet ready, and the Belters and the RC personnel working together to improve the planet. That was all very cool. But of course, the better stuff is the Bobby Draper. Of course, trying to convince her new friend, the crime boss guy, not to do the score because it's very shady, and they're probably just going to get killed. But he refuses to listen, and he goes off and does it and gets killed. And he walks right into a trap, just like she was afraid they would. But she shows up to try to save him, but she does manage to save Lily, the annoying person. Like, you're way over your head. You're really fucked now. Yeah, I can't stand her. But anyway, she does manage to save her, and she has that kind of confrontation with Philip and his other Belters while he is like, I got a present for you, bitch, and just explodes the crane. That was such an amazing shot when the crane just went crashing down. Like, I love the cinematography in season 4. I think it is the best the show ever did, and it was such an intense scene of the whole like dome crashing in and Bobby Draper just narrowly escaping that. Very amazing stuff. And then she realizes, of course, she's like now has a mission in life and contacts Avasarala, but she just lost. And Avasarala gives that nice speech to Nancy Gal, the going away speech, where she's like, yeah, one of us is wrong. I think it's you, but I hope it's me. Like, that's a great speech. That's a great Avasarala moment. But then Bobby calls her and it's like, hey, I'll work with you now. And Avasarala's like, Bobby, your timing sucks. Like, that was a funny moment. But of course, we also get the Ashford stuff, where Ashford is hunting Marco, which is pretty intense, especially once they get to Marco's ship, and we get that amazing scene with Ashford like flying down the corridors, guns a-blazing. Again, I love the cinematography of season 4. But we get this one strike I have against the episode is when Philip shows up, because Ashford's pointing a gun at Marco and Philip shows up pointing a gun at Ashford. Ashford should have just shot Marco because he knows he's going to die anyway. I mean, they could say, I heard the argument that he wanted to get that information from Marco, which he does get, and he eventually sends Drummer finds it and sends it to Avasarala, or sends it to Johnson. He sends it to Avasarala, but it doesn't come in time. But regardless, I think killing Marco would have been way more powerful, way more effective than sending that stupid information of Marco being vague. So I actually think Ashford clearly made the wrong decision, because he was, at this point, he was dead no matter what. He knew if he surrendered, he'd be dead. He knew if he didn't surrender, he'd be dead. So he should have just killed Marco when he had a chance. But other than that, like, Ashford's death, like, it's amazing Ashford was such a despicable character in season 3, and yet he really grew on you, and they really made him a great character. And his death was so sad and tragic, especially the way he was singing that same song as he was floating out into space. Not entirely scientifically accurate, but still an amazing scene. It's just a really powerful death. And then, of course, it ends on the ominous note that Marco's going to send those rocks towards Earth. It's a great way to see end the season, and really just overall really good episode. Alright, so now let's really get into it. Let's get into my top 15. So these are episodes that are 9.5, but normally I don't do decimal points as I say. So normally on my channel I consider most of these episodes 10 out of 10. Of course, I was rounding up from 9.5. So these ones are sort of staying at 9.5, but still top tier. Here we go. Top 15. Let's start with my number 15, which is season 6, episode 3, Force Projection. So this isn't about Luke Skywalker being a Force ghost. This Force Projection. This is so this is the episode where Officer Rala and the UN forces arrive at Sirius to find it's been abandoned and stripped, and that's Marco's tactic, which actually worked for him. Rather than trying to confront the UN fleet head on, he simply abandons them and runs away and leaves them with a civilian population who are starving, which so they gives them the tough choice of either using their limited resources to feed this population or letting them starve, in which Marco can then use that as a rallying cry to get more belters to support his cause. So it's a very very despicable but effective tactic, and Avasarala is left debating this with her Martian allies and other people involved, where of course she makes the decision to stay and feed the belt, and we see UN Marines passing out packages of food to the Belters, where one of the Marines is being really kind to the Belters and speaking Belter, where the other one's an asshole, and he calls him out on that for being an asshole, and Monica Stewart is embedded, and of course a bomb goes off, making it super intense. And we also get some bonding on the Rocinante. Clarissa sort of confesses to Holden what it was like killing Ren and how she sees his face every time that she uses the mods, and that's the real reason why she throws up. That was a really powerful, intense scene. We get more bonding between Amos and Bobby, which is amazing. Great to see. We get cameos, a couple season 3 cameos of characters who hadn't appeared since season 3. We get Prax, and he sends a message to Amos. That was also a touching moment, because Prax came up with, he risks his life and his family in order to get out information for food that could save millions of people on Earth, and brings it to Amos so Amos can take it to Avasarala. It was so great, and it's funny, he was saying all that scientific jargon, and Amos and Bobby were just looking at each other, and Amos is like, wait a second, he'll get to it. A funny moment, but great cameo. Also cameo from Pastor Anna. She was the one Monica Stewart got to do the piece on Earth and how it's suffering, to try to convince the belt get them to see firsthand the suffering that's being caused on Earth. And it's really interesting seeing the two different reactions. On Drummer's ship, we see Micho and Joseph, where Micho is very sympathetic, but Joseph is like, oh yeah, you don't know where you get your food and water, welcome to the belt. But then Micho's making the argument that just because they suffer doesn't make it right for them to force that suffering on Earth as well. And of course they're yelling and arguing while Drummer is busy trying to plan a heist with Walker. It's like, hey, what the hell, keep it down there. So that was cool. But of course, the real reason this episode is this high, and the real reason why I love it, is the confrontation between Holden and Marco Arnars, which was just beautiful. It was just so intense. Again, one of the most exciting, most suspenseful fight scenes that we get in The Expanse, where Marco goes out of his way to go after the Rosinante against Rosenfeld's recommendation because they have other plans. It's kind of interfering with his plans, but he lets his petty pride get in the way and his desire to kill Holden and Naomi for betraying him. And everyone can see through this bullshit, but they still have to go along with it. And the Rosinante is greatly outnumbered, 3-1, but they managed to do some very clever tactics from Holden. They managed to overpower them and have it so that the Pella is about to be destroyed. And we get when Holden calls Marco and that, James, hold on. Seeing the two of them like square off over the screen, it was like, oh my god, super intense. In the way that Marco just slightly moves over so that Philip can be seen behind him say, hey, yeah, you're gonna be killing your lover's son, just to let you know. And you see Naomi's reaction to it where she's like, oh, and she's like in pain, and the pain that she's gonna feel. And of course Holden can't do it. He disarms the missile at the last moment. And then Marco gets away. God, it's so powerful. Such a powerful scene. Such a great episode. Anyway, we'll now get into my number 14, which is It Reaches Out, It Reaches Out, It Reaches Out, It Reaches Out. Anyone who's listened to the audiobook of Book 4 knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, it is Season 3, Episode 8, It Reaches Out. Very intense episode. This is when Holden starts seeing Miller, and of course he doesn't know why, and he's freaked out about this, and he keeps like testing himself for protomolecule over and over again. And Amos is starting to notice this weird behavior and takes it to Alex's attention, and Holden starts to lose it. It's really good acting. With Stephen Strait, like he does, I think he really stepped up in season 3. That's the one thing I do love a lot about season 3. Is Stephen Strait really stepped up with his acting on Holden, and you get the sense of someone who's starting to lose his mind. And then you get that scene when he's talking to Miller, and Amos walks in on him and sees him talking to himself. He's like, I don't judge, but then he goes straight to Alex and tells him that Holden's crazy. So he does judge apparently, but. And we also see Clarissa, of course. She's still pining over the death of Ren, but that does not stop her resolve in blowing up a civilian ship, killing even more people, and blaming Holden for that. And you get that fake message that she planted of Holden claiming responsibility. And Alex and Amos starting to actually doubt him because he's been acting weird. But he tries to reassure them that it's absolutely the case now. And then on the Behemoth, Ashford actually very wisely judges that they need to fire a missile at the Rosinante, because if they don't, the UN will think that they're in cahoots with them and target them. So, and seeing Naomi, like, she knows that this is a fake. She knows that Holden didn't do this, but no one's listening to her, and Drummer has her removed and gagged. And that was super intense as well. But of course, the crowning achievement of this episode was that ending sequence when the Rosinante was running away from the missile, where Holden realizes he needs to talk to Miller to find out what to do, so he just looks around and runs away, and Amos chases him, and then he pleads with Amos. He's like, I've never asked you for anything, but I'm asking you for just 1 minute alone. And that was that was a huge moment and Holden and Amos' relationship, in such a powerful moment. And then to see that Miller just appeared, the music, the way it was filmed, it was amazing. Then when Miller reviews, if you go into the room too fast, the room eats you. And then Holden knows what to do and gets the Rosinante to flip and burn. Well, that was so intense. So intense. Such an amazing moment. Such an amazing episode. So next, we will get into my number 13, which is Season 4, Episode 9, Saculum. Now, this is the highest rated episode I have for Season 4, so this I would consider the best episode of Season 4. is, of course, the penultimate episode where the situation on Illis is pretty much resolved, where Mercury, everyone gets their eyesight back, and Mercury's first order of business is to kill Holden, but Holden gets contacted by Miller, and seeing them two interact and see that Miller's like trying to be controlled by the protomolecule version of himself, and he's sort of having this internal fight, and seeing him bond with Holden over that, it was really good stuff. And then Holden runs off jumps in a hole that takes him to the far side of the planet in order to find this dark area that may be the key to turning off all the protomolecule technology. But of course, Mercury finds out about this, and he and Way go chase after him. So then Amos and Elvie go chase after Mercury, and you have a really intense sort of final showdown. While in orbit, the Rosinante is trying to save the Barbara Bacola, where the Edward Israel sends a shuttle that's basically a bomb to try to stop them because the Rosinante is vulnerable. And it was so intense when Alex is like, hey, what's this shuttle doing here? And they're like, oh, just hold, Rosinante, we'll get back to you. But he's like, no, fuck that, and like says we're under attack, blows it up, but the shrapnel and all the debris ends up hitting Naomi and Lucia gets knocked out into space. And that was such an intense scene when Lucia is just floating in space and Naomi has to reach out and grab her. Such a great scene. And of course it's also extremely satisfying when they resolve the situation, they get the power back, and the first thing Alex does is to call the Edward Israel and say, hey, I have you target locked. You and I got to have a conversation. That's really, really awesome Alex moment. But, of course, we got the Miller guides Holden to the eye of an angry god, which is he can't even see. But then freaking Amos has to kill Way, and Mercury shoots Amos. And as soon as Holden hears about this, he goes to take care of Mercury and try to save Amos, where Elvie is left behind to deal with Miller, who's now in a robot, who starts talking to her, and he's like, are you Holden's ghost? That's such a good moment. And he's like, what I am is fucked. I absolutely love the Miller bot. So cool. And then we had the good old Western style shootout where Holden shoots Mercury, but refuses to kill him because that's what he wants, and he has to prove that he's civilized. And meanwhile, Millerbot's not faring too well, and Elvie has to drag it to the hole. Super intense episode, super intense. Great way to sort of wrap up the storylines of season 4. Loved it. So now let's get into my number 12. Season 2, Episode 13, Caliban's War. Love this episode. I love the music. I love the cinematography. I love the way it's filmed. So this is basically when the protomolecule hybrid goes on board the Rosinante, and they try to get rid of it, and Holden ends up getting pinned to the wall. And so they're in an impossible situation. They need to get the hybrid off the ship because it's trying to get to the reactor, which will destroy the ship. But they have a hard time doing it without killing Holden. And Amos suggests a plan that will kill Holden, lies about it killing Holden. But Naomi sees through that and says that we absolutely will not do that until it becomes necessary. Where Holden's like willing to do it. He'd rather die than, the whole entire ship blow up. He'd be willing to sacrifice himself to save his family. But Naomi's refusing to do it until Prax comes up with the plan to lure the protomolecule hybrid out of the ship using a nuclear warhead, which it will see the energy and chase after. And it was such a good scene, so powerful, so suspenseful. When Prax and Naomi are on the ship, and the creatures like crawling on the ship, like amazing music. And Prax is just staring at it, thinking, "Is this my daughter? Is this my daughter?" And then finally, he throws it up in the air like a ball, like a dog going to fetch a ball, and then just runs up in space. And Alex flips the ship around and fries it in the barbecue. That was amazing cinematography too, by the way. So that was all amazing stuff. And meanwhile, you got Avasarala and Bobby Draper fighting for their lives after Jules Paramal betrayed them, where Cotillard is shot and him and Avasarala are pinned, where Draper has to run around to try to get her suit and to see her come back with her Martian battle armor and just easily kill the goons. Very satisfying, and has every great finale does. It ends with a beautiful montage. This is one of my favorite montages, where Naomi's talking about how everyone has the protomolecule and the belt deserves it too, and we get scenes of the Abergast like being ripped apart. We get scenes of Bobby saving Avasarala. We get scenes of just the sort of montage stuff, and it ends with the great revelation, the shocking revelation that Naomi gave Fred Johnson the proto-molecule. Such a powerful way to end. And then it has like, I don't want to call it a post-credit scene because it's before the credits, but it seems like it's like kind of the epilogue scene where we see Dr. Strickland like slowly putting May into stasis and just whistling to himself. Very creepy way to end the season. I gotta tell you, the break between season 2 and 3 was the longest break between any two seasons I've ever had in my life. Is because of that, because it was so intense. I so wanted to see what happened next. Such a great finale. So then we now come to my number 11, another finale, Nemesis Games, which is season 5, episode 10. Really super intense episode where Drummer has to make the hard choice. She's sent on a mission to kill the Rosinante, and it's just one thing after another. That she's under Marco's thumb. She knows that if she betrays Marco, one of her lovers will get killed, and her other lovers are very invested in that. Oksana is like wants her to toe the line, to stay with Marco and do what Corral wants her to do, but it just gets to a breaking point where she realizes that she can't do it. It's not the right thing to do to see her betray Corral and go after and attack the other ships that are attacking the Rosinante. So amazing, and it splits her family because Bertal, whatever his name is, the blonde dude, tries to stop her from doing it, but then Michio knocks fucking Corral over the head and kills her. It's super intense. And then Joseph goes against Oksana's wishes and decides to attack the other ships as well. And they save the Rosinante. And it was so awesome hearing like Holden call to the Belter ships like he doesn't know, are they friend or foe? And then his Drummer is like, this is Drummer. Like, and it was so amazing. That whole battle sequence was just so good. And then on top of that, it was very tragic when Drummer and her family had to watch Serge, who was on Marco's ship, get killed. And it was just so despicable. Marco like turning in the camera and being like, "Fuck you!" Like, and split her family. Bertel and Oksana left and said they couldn't be around Drummer anymore because they saw it as her choosing Naomi over them. But Michio and Joseph stayed because they saw it as doing the right thing, that they should rebel against Marco. But Serge's death, that was just so powerful. And then we get the immensely powerful rescue of Naomi, where Alex and Bobby Draper show up, and they're going right into a trap. Naomi's trying everything to warn, but she has no radio, no way of warning, so she just jumps out into space and does hand signals, which is actually very lucky that Bobby Draper caught that and was able to see it, and they were able to slowly get there and save her. In the moment where the way it was filmed was so amazing, where it just focuses on Naomi's face and her perspective as Draper comes in like she's basically dying, and Draper comes in at the last second, pumps her suit full of air and saves her. It's like so amazing. Now, Alex's death I had a huge problem with because I knew it was because of behind the scenes things, because the actor was getting fired, and I still say they should have recast the actor rather than kill him off. But I've come to terms. I've gotten less upset over Alex's death, seeing how season 6 has done so well without Alex. In fact, not having Alex there gave them more opportunities for Amos and Bobby to bond. So I'm less bothered by it, even though it does definitely seem tacked on, because it was, because they had to refilm scenes without Alex and had to add in like CGI blood of Alex floating to show that he's stroked out. But I mean, story-wise, it does make sense to stroking out. They're actually taking from Fred Johnson's death from the book. So that's fine. Ultimately, I'm not as bothered by this as I used to be. And the rest of the episode is just so great, because then we get that scene where they go back to Luna and they're reunited with Amos, and that hilarious scene where Amos just like, oh, here's Kalisha. I'm glad you understand. Like, that's great stuff. And to see the look on Holden's face when Kalisha just walks in, hello, like, it's like so good. But then, of course, they had the conference on Luna, where it was a very like heartwarming moment where Avasarala points out to the Rosnate crew is this symbol of exactly what Marco hates, and that's what it's going to take to defeat him. The Belt, Earth, Mars, all joining together as one. Such a powerful thing. But then it doesn't end there. It ends with the amazing epilogue of we find Marco's true plan coming to fruition, where he would teamed up with a rogue group of Martians who all go through the ring and easily destroy any opposition they have there, take over the ring space, and the Martians who are now going to Laconia to start their new civilization. They have the proto-molecule, they have Kodazar, and we see Kodazar on the planet like with these weird platforms saying, and it's really, really, really foreboding, great dark ending, absolutely amazing. So yeah, I do still really love this episode. Great episode. So now we'll get into my top 10. Top 10 time. Here we are. 10 episodes. If I was doing a top 10 video, this would be it. It would start with this episode. My number 10, Season 1, Episode 9, Critical Mass. And this is the highest rated episode I have for Season 1. So it's my favorite episode from Season 1. This is the penultimate episode of the season. You might be wondering why I chose the penultimate over the finale. Because the penultimate is all setting up for the finale, where Holden meets Miller on Eros, and they don't get along. And I do love that Miller's suffering the grief of having found Julie, and Naomi instantly recognizes and tries to advise Holden about this, but Holden's just trying to figure out what's going on, and Miller just wants to lash out and kill the people in charge, and Holden's trying to hold him back, and eventually the two of them get irradiated, where he says, we're dead. Like, very intense way to end the episode. And this is also setting up for Avasarala discovering the conspiracy that Aaron Wright is hatching. But why I have this episode so high in my top 10, why I love it so much, is for the first 20 minutes of this episode, which is a flashback for Julie Mal. This is really convinced me the show was amazing. That first opening sequence, because this was the huge mystery of the season, of who was Julie Mal, what was the deal. We mostly saw it through Miller's eyes, through his investigating. But here we actually got to see what happened with her, and it was just so good. It was so good. It was such one of the best payoffs in television I've seen ever, because we get to see her with Belters, and how she reacts with the Belters, and how they appreciate her, and they say, well, you're one of us, and how she's like really takes that to heart. But then they get captured by the Anubis that kills the other Belters, but hold her prisoner, saying she's a complication. And we get the opening scene of the entire show, where she's trapped in the cell, no one's responding, and she goes out to see they're all been eaten by the proto-molecule. But we continue on from that, where she escapes and gets into the Anubis shuttle and goes to Eros, but then finds out she's infected and dying and trying to call dolls. And we see her like slowly going insane. It's very tragic. But what I love the most is the vision that she has of Miller, because she doesn't know who Miller is, but she sees Miller with that bird. And Miller's been having visions of Julie, but you think it's because he's investigating her. But really, and this is something that Ty Frank has confirmed, is that the protomolecule is a little bit like non-linear, so that they Julie and Miller get connected through the protomolecule, and it's kind of non-linear, so they're having that connection to what's going to happen, so they're seeing visions of each other, and it is so good. It's so good. Love these scenes so much. It was so powerful, such a great payoff to season 1. So now we get into my number 9, which is season 2, episode 12, The Monster in the Rocket. This episode, I warmed up to this episode a lot. So first of all, this is where Avasarala goes to meet with Jules Pierre Mal, and Bobby Draper just wants to eat cucumber sandwiches. And Avasarala, as soon as Jules Pierre Mal shows up, he's like, "Oh, Madam Secretary, so good to meet with you." And he's like, "Just get to the fucking point." God, I love Avasarala. So great. And of course, Aaron Wright. The whole episode begins with Aaron Wright thinking that he's going to kill himself and he's going to give in. But no, he doesn't kill himself. He kills the Martian ambassador, who was the one working with Jules Pierre Mal, so he can take over the Protomolecule Project. And that was an intense scene. He sends that message to basically saying to kill Avasarala and get the fuck back to work. So intense. But on the Holden Naomi side of things, Holden, I actually do like the storyline where Holden is so overcome by his PTSD, he's obsessed with killing the protomolecule. That's all he wants to do, and so he's risking everything to go off with the Rosinante, and Alex is like trying to warn him, "You're putting the ship in danger." He's like, "I don't give a fuck, we need to kill all protomolecule, kill." And Prax meanwhile is like, "Hey, maybe that's my daughter," and Holden's like, "No, it's not, we need to kill it." But Naomi doesn't want to be part of that. She says, "I can't be a part of that." She actually needs to do more to save the Belters because they didn't do enough on Eros. So she gets with Amos, and they try to get the Weeping Somnambulist back up and running so they can save Belter refugees. And this, to me, was the heart of the episode. This is why I love it so much. It's a scene where the captain of the Weeping Somnambulist just wants to abandon the Belters because they only have enough air for a certain amount, and they know if they open the doors there'd be a panic, and there's no way they can convince people to stay behind, that only a few people come on board. But Naomi refuses to accept that and says that she's not fucking leaving, and she even had to sedate Amos because Amos tries to stop her, and she goes out there and convinces the big guy to get everyone in line in order to save the lives. I mean, that was such a powerful scene, and she even offers her own place on the ship to him, but he like gently pushes her back in the airlock and saying, "You need to go," and he decides to stay there. Like, I'm getting teary-eyed just talking about it. It was so powerful, and it doesn't even end there, because then when the ship goes out into orbit, the Martians and the UN fleet tried to shoot it down because it's in restricted airspace, but then the Rosinante shows up, and Alex had to convince Holden. Holden didn't want to abandon his monster hunt, and Alex had to reach out to him and reason with him and be like, "Look, this is our family. This is what's really important. It really matters. They need our help." And so the Rosinante shows up and shoots down the Martian missiles, and then puts out that message like, "This is the warship, the Rosinante. Any ship that fires on these refugees will have our arsenal crammed up its ass." That was an amazing Holden moment. Absolutely loved it. And then, of course, the fleets do stand down because, as Holden says, they're more interested in fighting each other than they are fighting one random refugee ship. And so they get away. God, that was so powerful. Such a great moment. I absolutely love this episode. Okay, here we are. Best of the best. 10 rated episodes. Now, I said before, I usually don't use decimal points, so when I have 10 rated, I round up from 9.5 or more, considered 10 rated for me. However, this time, since I did have a 9.5, this is basically everything from 9.75 and up. So this is even more elite than what I usually have for 10 rated episodes. So yeah, just to say how much I love these episodes. So let me move over to my number 8, which is season 2, episode 2, Doors and Corners, the classic Miller line. So this is the second episode of season 2, where the Rocinante arrives at Tycho and they have to convince Fred Johnson to. This is the first appearance of Drummer, by the way, and they convince Fred Johnson to attack the station where they know the protomolecule experiments are being done, and that was an amazing scene, getting them to convince Fred Johnson to do this. We get the introduction of Cotillard in this episode, where Avasarala recruits him because she knows she needs someone on her team when she's trying to do this secret war with Aaron Wright. So she gets someone who owes her a favor, who knew her son and in fact got him killed, and so feels like but I love the relationship that these two have, and the way like Avasarala asks him, "Oh, can you do me a favor?" He's like, "Oh, I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it." like the relationship they have is so great. Love these characters. But of course, the real reason why I love this episode so much is the attack on Throff Station, which is an amazing sequence. You see Alex planning for it in advance, but then there's a stealth ship there that they're having to attack, so it's a very intense battle scene. There's 2 ramming pods that are going towards the station. One has Miller in it, and one of them gets destroyed. They find out it's not the one with Miller in it, but it's the one that had this Belter refugee that Alex helped save, to notice that he got killed. But then once the raiding parties get on board, they find just a bunch of weird psychopathic scientists and guards just using like putty rounds, so they're easily to overcome. And then you have, find Dresden, the mastermind behind the whole project, the scientist who again is acting like a sociopath, saying that this is just all the people killed on Eros is just a rounding error. And then Holden and Johnson come and they all interrogate them, and then Dresden kind of makes a deal with Fred Johnson, saying like, look, I don't care who controls the work, as long as the work continues. You want me to work for you? Fine, I'll do it. I'll give you everything I know. And Johnson's like, okay, let's talk. We'll entertain this idea. And then Miller just shoots him. And that's the real reason why this episode's so high, because that was such an amazing classic Expanse moment where Miller just out of nowhere just boom shoots him in the head, and then stands right next to Fred Johnson, looks down at Dresden, shoots him a couple more times. And Johnson's just like staring at him like, what the fuck? And Miller would later say that he didn't kill Dresden because he was talking crazy. He killed Dresden because he was making sense. And basically, he did not want Dresden to get away with killing all those people in Eros, and he was worried that if he continued this work with Fred Johnson, more people would die. And he said it was irresponsible. And basically, that he had to put a stop to it right then. And you know what? I actually agree with Miller here. I think he did the right thing. Holden's too sort of righteous to see it at the moment. Like in the next episode, Naomi tries to explain it to him, but he won't hear it, and he just hates Miller for just killing a man in cold blood. But this was a mass murderer who had no remorse whatsoever. Because he had his part of his brain ripped out that made him a sociopath, but still no remorse, and so he's willing to do it again, and he actually thinks he's doing the right thing. So Miller should shoot him in the head. But absolutely amazing moment. So now let's move over to my number 7, season 6, episode 5, Why We Fight. This episode is mostly dialogue. It's mostly people talking, and it's mostly like reflective scenes, not really anything sort of action orientated. And it was so amazing. It was, to me, this is what is like almost accumulation of all the characters' character arcs, where Alva Sorella realizes, she calls back to the first episode of the season where she was hanging the Belter and hooks and torturing him that way, and realizes like how terrible she was and how far she's gone, and that the Belters have good reason not to trust her. And then you have Drummer show up at Ceres with the relief supplies, and the UN are just being dicks to her and being like, "Oh, we're gonna board your ship," but then Alva Sorella puts an end to it. But Alva Sorella just wants an ally so bad that it's like, "Hey, Drummer, come be my ally," and she's not having it. Like Drummer's not buying into it, and then you get sort of amazing character moments with Bobby Draper and Amos, where Amos wants to quit, leave the Rocinante, but Bobby lays it out that the only thing that's important to those who cover your flank, those who watch your flank. And then, of course, invites her to the brothel, which she definitely did go with him for sure, no doubt about it. And just you get also other amazing character moments, but of course, it boils down to Naomi showing up to Drummer. And that does one of the best character interactions. It brings me to tears every time I watch it, where Drummer's really pissed off at Naomi because she loves her. And it's an unrequited love situation, but Naomi just silently convinced her like what the only thing. And I think talking to Drummer is really what helps Naomi overcome her issues that she's been suffering through all season, and she boils it down that the only thing they can do is really fight for those that they love. And Drummer's response, this is what brings me to tears. Drummer's response, where she's just like, fuck you, and then starts crying and hugs her because she knows it's true. She knows Naomi's right, and she hates her for it. She hates the fact that she loves her so much. And goddamn, what a powerful scene. And that, of course, leads into Drummer making an alliance with Alva Sorella, where Alva Sorella has finally, does more, shows her commitment. She goes into the middle of a poor area on Ceres and meets Drummer on her terms and commits, saying, you have good reason to hate me, but not to think I'm a liar. I will protect you. I will support you. And then Drummer has to, make a big show for all the other Belters that, look, I'm not your dog. I'm not your lap dog. I'm not going to take orders from you. But this is beneficial. So, and they had that classic handshake. So good. Such an amazing episode. Absolutely love it. So, next we'll get into my number 6, Season 3, Episode 10, Dandelion Sky. So this is a decent episode. It mostly deals with Holden on his way to the station in the middle of the ring gate, where Bobby Draper and the other Martians tried to catch up to him, and Draper tries to talk to Holden, but she hears him talking to Miller and thinks he's crazy. and we also get a storyline with Pastor Anna where it was a pretty powerful storyline, where this guy was trying to get help from her, but she was just so distracted by the ring gate that she was ignoring him, and he shoots himself and commits suicide. And she starts to realize how she should have reached out to him. She should have been less distracted, and it was a really powerful moment for her. And she gave that nice eulogy that sort of really respected him and people who were suffering the same thing that he was, which was an understandable fear of being in this weird alien space. It was a great way to sort of address the weirdness of the situation, But of course, the reason why I really love this episode is the ending, which is one of the best endings of any episode, where Holden and Miller reach the middle of the station where there's a circuit that Miller wants Holden to connect, but Holden's hesitant, says, "How do I know you're not just a proto-molecule monster just trying to trick me into killing everyone?" And Miller's just like, no risk, no reward. But Holden wants to know if this is really Miller. So he starts asking him about Julie, and Miller gets pissed off and goes away because he doesn't want to talk about it. But then eventually he returns, and he gives this lovely speech, and they had that great music that they played in the episode Home when Miller and Julie join. Like they play that beautiful music, or Miller's talking about how his time were right before him and Julie died, and about the poem where something about angels falling together and halfway angels is when a child dies, the angel falls with them halfway. And then Miller told Julie that if I fall with you, it ain't gonna be for halfway, and that she took his hand and she comforted him in his final moments. So beautiful. That also brings me to tears. But then we get the amazing, like one of the most intense scenes when the Martian, Bobby, and the Marines show up, and they actually try to kill Holden because he doesn't comply, but the station stops them, and then that station comes alive and like eats that Martian guy and just rips his body apart. And to see the look on Bobby's face where she's just like, oh my god, just her eyes so wide. And then Holden connects it, and he has that weird vision telling about the proto-molecule creators and how they were wiped out by this other alien species, and how they would just casually destroy whole solar systems, really driving home to Holden the danger at hand. But the really flashy, psychedelic, metaphorical way this whole scene takes place, where we see Holden naked flying through space, so good. This is so good. It was one of the most amazing endings of any episode. Anyway, we will now get into my episode top 5 now. We're into my top 5. I will start with my number 5, which is season 5, episode 7, Oidung. If I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's apparently it's the Belter way of saying goodbye, which kind of makes it more powerful for me. So yeah, this episode, Holden's on his quest to get the proto-molecule back. He tracks down the ship that has it, and he wants to capture it because he wants to get information on Naomi and where to find her. Where Bull and Monica just want to destroy it, but he wants to make sure the proto-molecule gets destroyed. But before he could board the ship blows itself up, and as we'll later learn, they actually shot the proto-molecule out in the torpedo, so it didn't actually complete their mission of destroying it. But of course, the reason why I love this episode is the drama with Naomi. This is some of the best acting in the show. Some of the most emotional, intense scenes where Naomi's forming a bond with Philip and trying to get him to see that Marco's using and abusing him and using him to kill millions, and that one day, she's like, one day I hope you'll realize, you'll feel the guilt of all the deaths that you cause. And he does. Like, this really resonates way into season 6 because the words she said to him really finally start to impact him and eventually get him to change his mind and leave Marco behind. So it's even more powerful watching this episode in retrospect, knowing the impact that she had on him. However, in the moment, and she tells him the story about how she almost committed suicide rather than leave him behind when he was a baby and Marco stole him from her. That she almost committed suicide, but at the last second decided to leave instead. And she has a line like the most powerful thing you can do is to walk away, which is true. And she was a very strong person for doing that, for not killing herself or for not being at Marco's mercy, to have the strength to do the last thing she would want to do, which is leave her son and walk away. and the regret that has haunted her for the rest of her life, but it was actually a moment of strength. And this episode really examines that, and then Sen confesses to her that he knew where Philip was and that he could have showed her. He could have saved Philip for her, but he really regrets it and doesn't realize that she would actually kill herself or leave. He never expected her to do that. He just wanted her and Marco to be a big family again, not realizing that that's not possible. And so he deeply regrets leaving, helping Marco hide Philip. And so Naomi says, "This is your time. You can redeem yourself now by helping me get out of here." But he tries to convince Marco to let her go, but Marco absolutely refuses, being an asshole. In fact, Marco gives Philip a talk that sort of corrupts him again and turns him against his mother. So they hatch a plan to use the Czechoslovakia to lure the Rosinante in and destroy it. And they kind of bring Naomi on the bridge so he can taunt her and be like, "Yes, your son came up with this plan to kill the Rosinante. We're going to kill Lover. We're going to make you watch. Then you can leave." And seeing Naomi's reaction, he tries to reach out to Philip, tries to convince him not to do this, but Philip just smacks her. So heartbreaking. And especially the way when Naomi turns to Sen and he literally just turns his back. So powerful. So heartbreaking. And then, of course, Naomi goes to the airlock and Sen thinks that she's going to commit suicide, but she's not. Instead, she uses the oxygenated blood and jumps out into space without a suit, which I think was one of the most amazing, powerful moments. And by the way, you can watch YouTube videos, look it up on the internet, totally scientifically accurate. Anyone who tries to tell you it's not scientifically accurate is wrong. But anyway, and jumps right out into space and just barely manages to get to the other ship in time before she dies. And again, it shows her strength of will, the lengths she's willing to go through to save her friends and to do the right thing. So powerful. I think is one of the most powerful moments of the entire show. Now, at the top of the video, I talked about an episode that I was in my top 5 that was the biggest disparity between me and IMDb ratings because it was 7th to the bottom. That was this episode. And I looked up the reviews to see why, and it does seem like people were split because there were a lot of great positive reviews, people who loved it just like me, but a lot of people who hated this episode, calling it boring, a waste of time, a stupid melodrama. Some people saying the Expanse jumped the shark, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude. And especially if you watching this don't like this episode, everyone's entitled to feel about an episode however they like. But my reaction to reading some of these reviews is, well, go back to watching Transformers. Watch your Michael Bay. Watch your explosions. Because this is fucking great emotional drama. But to be fair, I think a lot of the hate from this episode stems from the Naomi hate. There's this irrational Naomi hate, like a group of people who despise Naomi for what I think is no good reason. I don't understand it, and it's similar but not as bad as the hate for Skylar in Breaking Bad, and also there was hate for Daenerys in Game of Thrones as well. All strong women character. I'm sure that's a total coincidence. That has nothing to do why there's this irrational hate for these really great characters. But anyway, let me go ahead and move over to my number 4, which is Season 3, Episode 5, Triple Point. Now, this is my highest rated episode of Season 3, so the best episode of Season 3, in my opinion. And boy, do I love a mutiny story. I love mutiny stories, and this is one of the best that's out there in any media, movie, television, whatever. This is one of the best mutiny stories. Had me on the edge of my seat. This has been building for a couple episodes, and it started in Season 2 when Admiral Souther very foolishly resigned, and he's reaping the the sort of the penalties for doing so, because Admiral Wynn is now in charge, and so now he has to take order from Admiral Wynn, who is corrupt and working with Aaron Wright to kill all of Mars, to use the protomolecule hybrids, and doing a conspiracy under the radar. And then Sullard becomes aware of this. He gets the information from Kotiar and starts to and his two officers who support him are trying to rally other people in the fleet to support him, and he's like, no, we got to do everything above the book. So the problem with Sullard is that he's too much of a goody two-shoe, and it actually is his downfall in this episode, because he does do things by the book and tries to be above board and wants to make sure that Wynn is guilty before he moves against them, and by doing so he waits till it's too late, and Wynn ends up getting the better of him. But we had that showdown on the CIC where they go back and forth, where Sullard takes control of the fleet, and everyone's holding guns at Wynn and his men. But then some of Wynn's men catches them off guard, so then they take the guns, and the fucking Wynn kills Admiral Sullard. But then some of the other Sullard's men, his loyal officers, break free, and they kill Wynn's men, where pretty much everyone's getting killed, and Wynn gets shot, and then all the Wynn destroys one of the UN ships, and the UN ship starts fighting each other. It was so intense. It was one of the best mutiny stories I've ever seen, to be honest. And on top of that, you have the Martian fleet that's standing by, and you have a smart Martian commander who realizes not what's going on and doesn't interfere, and just sits back and say, look, if they want to destroy each other, just let them. But then she reaches out to the Sullard supporters, like, look, anyone who wants to be a friend with Mars, we'll support you and we'll give you help. And that's when Wynn realized he's fucked, because not only has he have half the UN fleet against him, he also has the whole Martian fleet against him as well, so he's greatly outnumbered. So in this amazing dark moment with amazing tense music, he just as a final fuck you to the world, and especially a fuck you to Mars, he launches the protomolecule hybrids towards Mars to kill everything and destroy Mars. And that look of that smug smile on this look as he's launching the hybrids, oh my god, so intense. And also the look when Holden and his team are on Io trying to rescue May and invade the compound, but they see the hybrids launch into space, and the look is on their face as they're like, holy fuck. So intense. Such a great episode. God, I love this episode so much. So, then we will get into my number 3, third highest rated episode, in my opinion. This is season 5, episode 4, Gargamella, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It is my highest rated episode of season 5. This, of course, is the episode where Marco's rocks hit Earth and destroy the fuck out of it. And Alva Sorella knows that it's stealth technology, and she tries to warn Nancy Gao, but she's been blackballed. No one in her administration will listen to her, so she has to trick a cook to slip a hand terminal in front of Nancy Gao so she can tell her, look, you have to redirect the watchtowers to spot these stealth, because the asteroids have stealth technology. We need to stop this right now. And Nancy Gao's like, yes, let's do it. We're going to work together. Everything's going to be great. But then, just then, an asteroid hits right by Nancy Gao, and you see it. It was such an amazing, this is beautiful cinematography, amazing shot of the asteroid just hitting where Nancy Gao's plane is just crashes and everyone dies. So intense. But then the intensity of this episode does not let up, because then you have Holden and Fred Johnson and Bull are trying to lay a trap for the people who are coming for Monica Stewart, but of course they're actually the ones putting the trap, because Sakai is working for them, and they almost kill Bull, and Bull has to escape at the last moment when Holden realizes the trap, but Sakai pops up out of nowhere and fucking shoots and kills Fred Johnson, which is such an intense scene, especially seeing Hold Johnson in his final breaths, and Johnson tells Holden where to find the proto-molecule, where just a couple episodes earlier he's like, I'm not fucking telling you where it is, but now he's like, you gotta stop them, because he knows they're trying to take it. And so Holden goes off to try to save the proto-molecule, but Monica Stewart was in the room, in Fred Johnson's room where the proto-molecule is, and a freaking mechanical spider robot thing. This thing is so fucking awesome. Just breaks in and starts and just hits at the floor until it gets the proto-molecule and just starts walking away from it. And Holden tries to stop it. He like rams a crowbar into it, but it just slaps him in the face and just fucks off. And they're left behind. And they manage to stop Sakai, but she's just so fucking arrogant. It's like, oh, you lose. So sad. I just want to smack her. Oh my god, but it was so intense. Such an absolute intense episode. But then we see Avasarala sort of celebrating as they're managing to destroy the other asteroids, but it's a hollow victory because so many people on Earth has already died. Like Earth is already screwed because of what they did. But then we see Naomi brought before Marco, where he kind of taunts her with it and says, oh, let me show you what I did. And then he gives a speech of letting the world or the solar system know who he is, and it's such an amazing speech, like an amazing speech in a very despicable way. Like, it really gets to me. And I was like, oh man, where he's like, we are and forevermore free. Like, so powerful. It was such a great introduction to this villain, even though I know he's appeared before this episode, but it really like thrust him. This is the guy who's really gonna fuck shit up. Such a dark moment, such a oh my god, just a really, really good episode. So now let me get into my number 2, my second highest episode of this amazing show, and that is season 6, episode 6, Babylon's Ashes. This is my highest rated episode of season 6. This, of course, is the series finale, at least up to this point. And, yeah, I don't know. This seems like this isn't as popular as I would, but I think this is one of the best series finales of all time. And watching it again in the context of watching the whole show, I think this is the perfect ending to the show. It really wraps up all the character stories in an amazing way. You see, first of all, you see Clarissa bonding with the crew, Naomi finally forgiving her and realizing that the reason why she wouldn't refuse to forgive her is because she was jealous that she got to wash the blood off her hands, where she wanted that for Philip. And then you had Naomi, and then Clarissa saved the ship during the battle. And then you had, of course, the bonding between Bobby and Amos really showed when they were in the battlefield, when Amos like came out of nowhere to watch her flank and to sit there and to stand over her while she's getting bombarded by bullets. And that whole fight scene, by the way, was so amazing. It was definitely the best film, the best fight scene of the entire show, I will say, hands down. Especially seeing like Amos just flying towards the station where all this shit just explodes around him, and a lot of people in his team get killed. All these all these classic sci-fi heroes who are on their team, like Ripley and Jack O'Neill, get killed, and William Riker all get killed around them. God, it was absolutely amazing. And seeing Bobby have her moment where she goes out and just fires missiles at the fucking thing, like, it was so good. It was so good. But then you got other moments too. You got Drummer having her moment where she is ambushed by Marco because, of course, he tricks everyone, and she gets like her ship blown to bits, has like a huge hole on the side of her ship, and most of her crew is dead. But she's like, "Oh, let's ram the fuck out of it." But Walker beats her to it, and that's a great death for Walker, who slams into Marco's ship and kills Rosenfeld, which had a great death for her, who she was like a villain, yet you really felt sad at her death. And Philip made Philip realize that Marco was not a good person to be around and that he needed to get away from him. And then, of course, you have the Rosnate crew in the ring gate thinking that they're all fucked. But Naomi comes up with the plan to wake up the angry aliens to get them to kill Marco on his ship. And it was such, that was, to say this is a powerful moment, and this is really why I think it's the second best episode of the show. I mean, all the reasons, like, there's a lot of good stuff about this episode. But this is one of my favorite moments of the whole show, where Naomi pushes the button that kills Marco, which I think is very fitting. Yet it's bittersweet for her because she thinks that she's killing her son as well, and to see her scream in agony after she pushes the button was so sad. It was so powerful, and even though I knew that Philip didn't die, it was still powerful because she thinks he died. And then see Holden try to comfort her, and she's being refusing the comfort. But it's also amazing seeing Marco ripped molecule by molecule by the alien. What a great way to see death, to see this despicable villain finally get killed. But then, of course, the cleanup and the aftermath was also extremely powerful. It showed the character growth that Holden went through, because Avasarala wants to make Holden the president of the new transport union, but he realizes that it needs to be a belter, so he kind of conspires with Drummer and tricks him in order to get Drummer. It's sort of out politically foxes Avasarala at her own game, which I love. And Avasarala is just like, oh, I'm gonna undo this, and Holden's like, no, don't even try. And she can see him, she can see that he's right, she can see that he's doing the right thing here, and so goes along with it and says, I hope you're right, and shakes his hand. It's just an amazing moment. And then, of course, it ends with the best montage of the entire show, the singular best one, where Naomi talks about how when you help people, you don't always get to know that you did help people, because you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for them. And we see in visuals that this is true for her, that she actually saved her own son, but she'll never get to know it. And that right there is really powerful shit. That is really, really powerful. I mean, that's what makes this show amazing. And then, of course, it ends on the best relationship in all of television. Holden and Naomi, as they go off into space, as the Expanse music plays. It's perfect ending for the show. I think this may be my favorite series finale of all time. Screw Breaking Bad. Oh my god, it's just such an amazing finale. But it's not my number one, so let me get to my number one favorite episode. This is maybe my number one favorite episode of any show ever, to be honest. I think it is. I think this is what made me realize The Expanse was a masterpiece. Not just a good sci-fi show, but a masterpiece. And I am, of course, referring to Season 2, Episode 5, Home. I mean, what can I say about this episode? So this is when, of course, Eros turns into a ship and starts ramming towards Earth, and everyone on Earth is about to die. It's basically going to wipe out all of humanity too, and so everyone's desperate to stop this from happening. Holden is willing to, and his crew basically are willing to die, become corpses because they're flying too fast, in order just to paint a laser on the Eros so that the UN missiles can destroy it. And it's such an intense chase scene, but we find out at the heart of it that it's Julie Mao who's controlling it. And Miller realizes that if they can't destroy Eros, if the missiles try, that they'll just dodge that as well, because Julie is kind of not, she's a consciousness, is still alive, but she doesn't really realize, she's not aware of what's really happening. She doesn't know she's a protomolecule. She doesn't know that she's about to destroy all humanity. She's just following an instinct to go home. And this, it tears me up. Like this, I cry like a little girl. Like I was like bawling my eyes out when I just watched this episode, and I've seen it like dozens of times already. um, it's just so powerful. And this is like foreshadowed. I didn't realize this in earlier episodes. Miller has a vision where he hears Julie saying, "Oh no," he tells Naomi about it, that he had a vision where Julie said, "You're with me now," which is what she says in this episode, because it's the precognition, because of the non-linear nature of the protomolecule. And it all pays off when you hear her saying, "You can't take the razor back. I'm gone and gone." And he starts to realize what's going on. That she's the brain of it, and she's acting on an instinct to go home. And so I'm almost going to tear up now, to be honest. So he has to convince her to not go to Earth, to go to Venus instead. And again, they have that amazing, beautiful music playing that just really sells the scene, and it sells the connection to Miller and Julie. How, they don't really know each other, and Miller fell in love with Julie without really knowing her, but they still have this connection, and he's still able to gently talk her down, to make her realize that they need to go somewhere. And I love when he tries to get her to stop, and she turns into the evil Marco monster. It's like, "Can't stop the work." He's like, okay, let's not stop the work, but let's go to Venus. The work can continue there. So he realizes that he doesn't try to push it, but he tries a different tactic that still works. And also the element of the bomb, he's holding the bomb the whole time that keeps going off, and he has to touch it every minute or else it'll explode and kill everyone. And he's planning on using that to kill Julie if he needs to. And that one moment where she's acting all crazy, he takes his hand off, and the bomb's slowly going off, and you see the ticking going more expensive. So he's about to explode it at the last second, stops it, changes his mind, no, I can talk her out of it. It's super intense stuff. And then he just has Julie hold the bomb, and when she touches, just deactivates immediately. And she says, "You're with me now," and then they kiss. Now this is something I heard Ty Frank, one of the writers of the novels who wrote for the show, saying that he didn't like the kiss. He fought against it, and I think Duran Shankar and other people overrode him. And I'm glad, because I disagree with him. I love the kiss. I think the kiss really works. It helps sell the beauty of the moment and the connection of these two characters, which again is even more powerful in retrospect with the story that Miller tells about the angels falling halfway. It is so beautiful. And then, of course, it ends with the montage. I stand by my guns that the season 6 montage was the best. The episode series finale montage is still the best montage of the whole show, but this is still a good montage, and it's a better episode, where we see Eros crash into Venus, and the Rosnate crew are drinking the gin, the Giganime gin that Miller mentioned in his honor. Just so touching. It's so beautiful. I think it is the best episode of any show ever, honestly. Anyway, that is my number 1 episode of The Expanse, Home. So that's it. I have now ranked all the episodes of The Expanse. Thank you so much to anyone who watched this long ass video for that and stuck with me from that. And as I said, this is just my opinion. You want to tell me I'm an idiot for liking Odang or for not putting Abaddon's Gate in my top 5, you go right ahead. You're welcome to your opinion. This is just mine, which I wanted to share with you, and I thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out my channel for many more videos. I cover The Expanse. I'll still have more videos on The Expanse even though it's over. May take a break for a little while, but I'll get back to it eventually. I cover other shows such as Star Trek, doing Star Trek Discovery, which starts up again soon, and all other things Star Trek, and shows like Star Wars The Clone Wars and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.